like to welcome everybody to the February 7th County Commissioners meeting. And as always, we'll open with invocation, and Commissioner Richard Helms will give it to us tonight.
Bow your head, please. Dear Heavenly Father, you are indeed the giver of all gifts, and we come together this day to seek your wisdom and guidance. In this time of pandemic and so much misleading information on the health and safety of our citizens, give us insight to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and good in your sight. Please give special protection to the military, law enforcement, firefighters, and EMS that risk their lives to ensure our safety. Finally, dear Lord, grant us humility to always seek your will in all that we do and say. In thy name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We'll have informal comments, and let me read something to you. Each speaker must address the board from the lectern and begin their remarks by giving their name, stating whether they are residents of Union County, indicating the municipality within which they reside, if any, and stating the topic about which they intend to speak. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to make remarks. A speaker may not yield any of his or her time to another speaker. Speakers may not discuss matters which are the subject of public hearings, and they must be courteous in their language and presentation. Restatements or repetitive comments by the same speaker, whether at the same or separate meetings, may be ruled out of order and terminated by the chair. Personal attacks will not be tolerated. Speakers may leave written comments and/or supporting documents, if any, with the clerk of the board, who is Ms. Lynn West right over here. And I know sometimes it's confusing. This has nothing to do with the public hearings. This is just informal comments. So, with that being said, Noyes Corrigan.
Thank you. My name is Noyes Corrigan. I've lived at 5001 Colton Ridge Indian Trail since about 2008. I currently have a son at Sun Valley Middle School. I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about recent decisions by Union County Public Schools. I changed careers a few years ago to an occupation in which most employers are located in uptown Charlotte. It didn't take long for the almost hour-a-day commute on 74 to start to wear me down. And my wife and I began to wonder if moving to Mecklenburg might be better. Then in February 2020, a funny thing happened. I'm embarrassed to think I ever considered moving. The pandemic struck, and I'm extremely happy to be a resident of our county. While the children of my coworkers were stuck in virtual for over a year, my son got back to school. When they were forced to wear masks, we had the option. And now, when children are still the only group in society being singled out for contact tracing and isolation, we've gotten rid of that burden. But it goes beyond the school system, and that's why I'm here tonight. Although it wasn't apparent at first, the COVID-19 pandemic revealed itself to be a battle over much larger issues, sovereignty and local control. This January resolution and the decision for Union County Public Schools to drop the quarantining and contact tracing of healthy students is a victory for local government. If there's any hope for regular Americans and our values to survive the so-called Great Reset, it resides in our communities. The working together of the Board of County Commissioners, the Health Department under Dennis Joyner, the UCPS Board showed that local communities can still make choices that benefit their own residents instead of the ones that benefit the careers of experts in Washington or Raleigh. Thank you, Commissioners, for coming together on this one. People looking in from outside the county may not realize that this was done as a team. To make it clear, I personally would like to see a motion in support of UCPS's decision to follow through on that January resolution when cases declined in the current surge. It would send a strong message that, as our name suggests, union is united. Thank you again for bravery in doing what's right, even though it may not have been easy. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Deb Helms.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. And Deb Helms, and I have been a proud resident of unincorporated Union County for 27 years, and I am so proud to be part of this county because we really do represent the strong conservative values that I wish this entire state represented. And the resolution, as I spoke about at the last meeting, with the state and the school board in regards to the contact trace and quarantine has followed through, and I would just really like to see this board follow through in support of that. The last time this was attempted by the school board back in September, it ended with a vote of no confidence by the majority of this board in our school board. I am a product of the Union County school system. I've always been proud of that, and I hope that we as a county and you as our county leaders, we've came so far. We're leading the way in the state. Other charter schools in the county are already starting to follow the lead. So I hope we can stand united, move forward, and not fall into that same circumstance again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just like to make the board and folks that are here right now aware that we've opened up an adjacent room across the hall in the HR training room. It has seating, and there's a big screen. The audio's on and available. If you'd like a chair over there, you're more than welcome to go across the hall. It is open for your convenience.
Thank you. Jessica Cook.
Good evening, Jessica Cook, and I live in unincorporated Union County. Tonight I have come here to publicly express my support and gratitude for UCPS Board of Education. I fully support their decision to end all contact tracing and isolation measures for our children. Last September, I also appeared before you expressing my support to the Board of Education when they made the brave and correct decision to move the responsibility of contact tracing and quarantine orders to the Health Department where it legally belonged, per state statute 130A-145. But there are many folks out there who don't know what happened after that, and it's important to know truth and facts. After the Board of Education moved responsibility to the Union County Health Department where it legally belonged, Cooper and Cohen in Raleigh threatened our district with abatement. And unfortunately, at that time, this board gave a 3-2 vote of no confidence of our school board, and that was very disappointing. I mean, think about it for a minute. They were criticized and threatened because they wanted to stop doing an activity that was in fact illegal for them to do it in the first place. To understand what an abatement notice is, one needs to understand the concept of a nuisance abatement. Abatement notice is the notice given to the owner or occupier of a property as a warning that his or her house has infringed local ordinance or laws, and he or she must take the necessary measures to correct the violation. Or else the process of abating whatever nuisance that property's been causing to the community will begin. That is, if the owner or occupier doesn't do the work, someone else is about to go inside the property or enter the premises and fix whatever is causing the disturbance. But wait a minute. Are those in Raleigh saying our healthy children attending school are a nuisance and causing harm to the community and therefore needs abatement? I think that was way out of line. And remember, no adults in our state have been subject to any contact tracing or quarantine. None. Only our children. But make no mistake about it, Raleigh threatened our school district with abatement because they wanted to punish our Board of Education for standing up to their tyranny, not because they really thought our children were harmful to the community. I applaud our school board for being brave and standing up and calling an end to it. We're going on year 3. Our children are not a nuisance to the community, and thankfully our school board recognizes that. So tonight, I'm asking you to make a motion to support our UCPS Board of Education ending contact tracing and isolation for good. That together, as Union County leaders, you will lock arms with our school district and stand strong against any further intimidation or legal threats coming down from Raleigh. Thank you.
Harold Shumacher.
Good evening. Harold Shumacher, Waxhaw. I'm here to talk about item 22-030 in the agenda here, and it's talking about funds to increase vaccinations. So I've spoken to you guys before, and that money looks like it's something that's been sent to keep you guys from ignoring the damages that are happening because of those vaccinations, the injuries and the deaths. You probably just heard the New Mexico senator just had a stroke. He's fully vaccinated. Nobody's connecting the fact that he's fully vaccinated and just had a stroke, and that's one of the items that's one of the most common side effects of these vaccinations. This epidemic that we have in Union County, another gentleman and I went and counted the death certificates in 2020. Hasn't been released yet, but the total number of deaths in Union County went down in 2020 over 2019. How do you have a pandemic if the deaths went down? That's all-cause mortality. It's not possible. This is an epidemic of positive cases. One study, they took 1,500 positive tests, sent them to 7 different labs. Not a single one was actually COVID. They were influenza A and influenza B. That's what's going on. It's about cases. According to the 1986 law, the Vaccine Injury Protection Act, Pfizer will only get immunity for their approved drugs if they get approval at all age groups. So that means the last age group they need is 0 to 5 years old. Once they have blanket immunity for any injuries and death. That is the reason why no one is getting an approved version of the drug. Have you ever wondered why they're only using the emergency use version? It's because they don't have blanket immunity for the approved version. And that happens when they get our youngest children. And that money that they're sending you is so that you look the other way while they go after our kids. So the other thing I looked at today is I looked into the VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. There's millions and millions of adverse events reported. But our healthcare community, our health department, we ignore those. Nobody makes comments about it. Nobody asks about it. There's thousands of cardiac arrests. There's thousands of deaths. There's blindness. There's Bell's palsy, all kinds of things. And on top of that, Attorney Thomas Renz has access to, there's some whistleblowers that came out with information from the Department of Defense medical database. And they've got 467% increase in pulmonary embolisms, 1,100% increase in neurological damage, 285% increase in acute myocarditis, 1,500% increase in reports of chest pain. This is in the DOD medical database, so it's about the best indicator that we have. So these things are dangerous. So I ask you to not only not spend money to increase these vaccinations, shut down these sites, and do an investigation, get the real data out to the public and warn them. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Brittany Boldin.
Good evening. My name is Brittany Boldin. I live in Weddington Unincorporated. First time I ever spoke to you all was in June. We were new here, and I didn't know where I lived. I had a trash can with Indian Trail, and my address was Matthews, and people told me I lived in Weddington. So since then, I've made progress, and now I know. I want to have a conversation. I just want to start a conversation. Our founding fathers experienced What they experienced with abuses from the centralized power of the British Crown taught them that the greatest threat to individual liberties was a national government with too much power. They were so fearful of any federal overreach that even while acknowledging the need to form a union to oppose the Crown's oppression, the colonies refused at first to surrender any state sovereignty to a national government. They knew. They tried their best to prevent this day. The day where we wake up in the middle of a nightmare, the nightmare of realizing that the federal government has been chipping away at state sovereignty for decades, and we have all been asleep at the wheel. We have allowed our love of cheap goods, fast service, and entertainment distract us while the federal government rolled the Trojan horse into all levels of government, arriving at our collective back door. Without even realizing it, we have been continuously selling our sovereignty for what we thought was help from the federal government in the form of federal funds. For too long, we've kidded ourselves in thinking that taking money from the federal government isn't selling our future generations' freedom. If we continue to apply for and accept funds from the federal government with strings attached, we are, in essence, selling our children and grandchildren into servitude. It is time to take back our sovereignty. I am asking you to do the following things. Stop taking any federal funds with strings attached. I beg you to read the fine print. Make any acceptance of federal funds transparent. We, the people, should be able to see the terms associated with any money accepted from the federal government to make sure our local government isn't selling our future freedom for a quick payday today. Lastly, in regards to the COVID money that Harold was just talking about, I'm curious, does it bother our county government at all that you are accepting money to promote a vaccine that has had more reported adverse events in the first 4 months than all the other vaccines in 30 years combined? If you proceed on this path, you will not be able to claim ignorance, and your participation will make you complicit. No one taking this vaccine is getting true informed consent, as there has been a level of censorship that has never happened in this country since its independence. Where there is censorship, informed consent is not possible. My 82-year-old mother got her second shot, started her period, yes, I'm saying that on live stream, and now has a growth in her uterus that has grown 4 centimeters in the last 4 months. I have an aunt on my husband's side that got Guillain-Barré syndrome. I know people that have had COVID and that have suffered with COVID and have died from COVID. But I will tell you, the amount of people piling up with adverse events is surpassing any COVID problems that I've experienced. Thank you.
Thank you. That ends our informal comments period. And now we will have a public hearing for rezoning petition CZ 2020-009 Studley. And Bjorn Hansen will present.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Manager Watson. This is a public hearing for a rezoning titled CZ 2020-009 Studley, for the last name of the applicant. This is a request to rezone 6.41 acres in Monroe Township from RA 40 to B4 with conditions in order to add mini storage buildings to an existing business. The list of approved uses is below, and it's an expansion of an existing business that's already there, but it's not zoned business. It had some special use permits and was grandfathered before zoning took effect. So this cleans up the zoning for the property as well, and will actually rezone the existing business to bring it in compliance with the zoning that's appropriate for that use. The existing conditions are shown here. You can see the business right there looking towards Monroe. This is looking north towards the railroad, west towards Waxhaw. On the left will be where the mini storage is located, and then this is the actual site. You see some existing rental equipment, and all this will be replaced with the mini storage. In terms of the site plan, looking towards the north, this is the mini storage, 3 rows. It'll be fenced in. The existing metal building is the existing business. There's a rental house towards the back that will be demolished to make room for the mini storage. In terms of development status, it's mainly residential along NC 75, but there are a few spots of business, but it is a combination of large lot residential and agricultural uses generally. In terms of environmental features, there is a historic stream on the site. It's been relocated to the eastern edge of the property, so this will not have any additional environmental impacts by disturbing the additional area. The zoning for the area, again, you have some commercial, actually industrial across the street, but generally it's 40,000 square foot large lot residential, some R20 on the north side of Newtown Road. And this parcel, again, is a business, but it's zoned RA40, so this will be changed to accommodate the new use. In terms of transportation, there is a funded all-way stop improvement being made in the future by the NCDOT at Fletcher Broom and NC 75. The most recent traffic counts along NC 75 are approximately 7,000 vehicles per day and 1,500 vehicles per day for Fletcher Broom. In terms of the land use plan, this is all purple because there's a half-mile wide overlay along NC 75 called an employment corridor. If that weren't in place, then it would be considered rural residential on this side of NC 75. So employment corridor is consistent with what they're proposing to use. In terms of public feedback, a community meeting was held in late November. 5 residents attended. The only comment was about hours of service, so that they didn't have to worry about vehicles coming in the middle of the night and headlights shooting into their yards and windows. So the applicant proposed to limit the hours of service, which is reflected in the conditions. In terms of staff and the planning board review, negative is that it is commercial use and increasing into commercial use immediately adjacent to large lot residential. However, it does bring the existing businesses into compliance with zoning, and it is consistent with the land use plan for the area. We recommended approval and the planning board recommended approval. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, the applicant is here to present background of the rezoning application.
Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
If you would, state your name and...
Hello, my name is Gary Studley. I'm a Union County resident. I own the Hot Rod Shop on Highway 75. We restore classic cars and build hot rods. This land next to the shop, I'd like to put the mini warehouse, and mini warehouse will actually help our existing business. Right now, I'm having to store cars in a work area, and I'm waiting on parts, number of reasons I'm storing cars. Customers send them to us from around the country. These cars I could store in these mini warehouses as well. That lot that I'd like to put the mini warehouses on, I used to have car shows in that lot, so there will not be any car shows anymore, so the traffic there will be eliminated. I had 3 large trees there that I had to cut down. One of them was completely rotted, and then the other 2 I was concerned about branches falling off the trees during these car shows. Because I cut them down before I went commercial or trying to go commercial, I have to replant trees to take up the space or the diameter these trees have taken. And I just felt that was unfair. My back lot is full of trees. I'll actually have to cut down trees to plant new trees. So if you could find it anywhere in your heart. Can I answer any questions?
I have maybe a question to staff.
Yes, sir.
In conjunction with the trees.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any ability to change any of that, or is that something, because this is not a conditional, is it?
I do. The forestry division said I will have to plant trees.
Bjorn, could you answer Commissioner Rushing's question?
Yes, that was part of the site review, and that's a pretty typical condition if trees are cut down during the process, to have mitigation at, I think it's 125% of the diameter of the tree, and that was accommodated in the buffering throughout the site. So that was nothing unique. That would be done as a part of any development that gets proposed.
So what you're saying is we don't have any control for that.
I looked back to Lee as I walked up here because he's thumbing through the zoning ordinance to see if you have the flexibility to grant that variance versus the Board of Adjustment. So honestly, I don't have the answer. I'm waiting on him. So
Mr. Matthews.
It is the board's policy that you don't always make decisions at this meeting. We can certainly bring you back that information if we don't have it available now, but Lee may have it.
Sure. So the tree provisions in the county ordinance, you know, if it's in what they call the buildable area, which is the area between the property line and the setback, and you cut that tree down, you are supposed to mitigate that tree. It does allow the permit issuing authority. In this case, this is the rezoning is not a permit. The permit would be done at the site plan review. So it does allow the permit issuing authority to modify or waive those requirements if it's determined that trees, you know, new trees can't have a healthy area to grow in, or if, you know, trees that are removed were dying or already deceased. That's been done before. I will say that, to be honest with you, I wasn't aware of the situation in depth, but normally the way that's handled is the applicant will call up the urban forester. Urban forester will go out, take a look at the tree, and say, you know, yeah, I agree, it's dead, or, you know, this tree has you know, a year left. Go ahead and take it down. That's typically how that process is handled.
So, and again, I'm trying to get clarification. The trees were how big?
Probably 30 inches in diameter.
So he has to plant a tree back like a sapling, or he can plant a?
They have to be a minimum of 1.5 inches diameter, I think, when they're planted.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so again, he doesn't have to go get a tree with the.
No.
But he has
you
to
just
plant 36 inches worth of.
Yeah, it's 125% of
stump.
whatever was taken down.
I'm thinking concrete and fences. And and is that gonna change a lot about his lot?
I think the site plan that was developed, it was accommodated for in that site plan.
That there was an area to be able to do that? Okay. But y'all can tell us more about before we do the approval, right?
Yes, sir, we could come back with some more information. And again, the site plan review process, this is the rezoning, this is a sketch level plan. So when the site plan review process goes through, there's a little bit more in-depth review that takes place.
Okay. That satisfactory?
Yes, sir.
Thank
you. I appreciate
Mr.
your
Chairman,
time.
can I
Yes,
ask
sir.
a question, please?
sir.
Mr. Studley?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you cut the trees initially for the car shows?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Probably 2 years ago.
So really, there's no trees there that are being cut to build your buildings?
No,
Is that-
sir. No, the trees were cut before I decided to do the zoning.
So why does it apply?
Well, that's what Commissioner Rushing, and I think your question is spot on. Mr. Studley has spoke with me. They were going to have to do 3 trees, but they did an autopsy on one of them, and it was determined that it had been dead a long time. And those cars, some of them are $100,000 if a tree limb was to fall. So the question was, I asked Mr. Matthews, I said, when did we have a rule that residential property can't cut trees down? He said, we don't. So, as Commissioner Helms said, he cut the trees down before he started the process. So I think it is within our power to waive that tree requirement.
Okay.
It's been a while since you've had car shows.
It is.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic has stopped our car shows.
So if I cut a tree down on my property, in 5 years, they're gonna come back and say I gotta plant more because I cut a tree down one time? I don't see where that part of the ordinance is applicable for what you're trying to do.
Right, that's,
Okay.
Okay.
Any more questions?
okay. Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to the planning hearing for rezoning petition RZ 2021-08 Crane. I'm sorry, I close. Any other speakers for the Studley hearing? Okay, I'm going to close that public hearing. Thank you. Now we'll go to 21-604, public hearing for rezoning petition RZ 2021-008 Crane.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board, and Manager Watson. This is RZ 2021-008. The R is important. This is a rezoning, not a conditional rezoning. We call it Crane because it's on Crane Road. And this is a request to rezone a parcel from R40 to R15 to allow it to be split into 2 lots. Again, because this is a straight rezoning, there are no conditions associated with it. The existing conditions along Crane Road, a lot of existing residential from pre-subdivision era, and then subdivisions as well. You can see on the left side, just south of the site, subdivision, then across the street, traditional single-family residential stripped out along Crane Road. This is the existing house that's on the site. The lot that would be split out would be on the left, which is to the south. North opposite and north on the same side of the street, again, you can see legacy single-family housing that's been there for decades. There is a site plan associated with it because we wanted to make sure that what was proposed was feasible. So this shows that you could split out the one house, have the appropriate setbacks, and then have a buildable lot immediately to the south. It would require extending sewer to the site, which would be from the south a good ways. There is water along the road, and behind it is a subdivision. However, there's no easements to allow sewer to be granted across there, so it would have to come north along Crane Road. In terms of nearby municipalities, Weddington is to the east but not contiguous. In terms of development status, it's largely built out, although you do have this island of a larger lot, single-family residential that is along Crane Road. In terms of our environmental features, there's single-family residential development immediately behind it and across the street. The zoning is a little bit of R20 to the north, but mainly R40 and residential conservation through the town of Weddington. Transportation, there's no funded improvements along Crane Road. The 2017 traffic count was 5,100 vehicles per day. We did put our traffic counters out in December, and the count was 6,100 vehicles per day, which is in line with 4 years' worth of growth in the area. Land use plan calls for single-family residential, which, if you don't have utilities, means essentially 1 unit per acre in order to accommodate well and septic. With utilities, it could be on the order of 2 units per acre, or potentially higher if you're immediately adjacent to a commercial node. Public feedback, not much. We weren't required to hold a community meeting, so the only feedback was by posting the signs and sending out letters to adjacent residents when we held the planning board meeting and then this public hearing. One resident called to inquire about it but didn't express an opinion for or against. No one spoke at the planning board meeting in January. Staff recommendation, the negatives are that the proposed density is higher than what's recommended in the land use map. After you subtract out the right-of-way for Crane Road, you end up with a little more than 0.7 of an acre, and 2 units per acre out of that is close to 3. It sets a precedent for similar rezonings in the future along those adjacent parcels along Crane Road, and would require significant sewer extensions to serve the property. So you're creating these lots that really can't be served here and now. The positives, it does provide additional flexibility to the property owner. We recommended denial, and the planning board recommended denial. So happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, the applicant is here to speak as well.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you. What's the total acreage of the property now?
It's about 9/10 of an acre. And let me go back to actual drawing. It should have some more specifics.
So the septic system for the existing dwelling?
Yeah, it's part of the overall parcel.
So the parcel next door, the septic field is in that parcel?
Yes, it's part of this.
Okay, so it would have to go onto sewer as well?
Correct. Both lots would have to be served with sewer.
Okay, and just for my information, the current way, we've talked about being able to build additional structures on land, like a mother-in-law apartment or things like that. I mean, is that what this is, or is they looking to sell that lot with a?
No, I mean, that type of situation involves putting it on your property. This involves splitting and have two houses on two pieces of property.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Helms.
You made the comment that there would be appropriate setbacks. What is that setback?
Well, for R15, it'd be 30 to the front, 30 to the rear, and 10 to the sides.
And how far is the sewer away from that?
About 1,000 feet.
And are the applicants planning on paying for that 1,000 foot of sewer to get to their property?
Whether they are or not, I don't know, but they're aware of it.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Should this be approved, this new development that would presumably hook into sewer would have to pay a system development fee, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Helms, did you have another question? Okay.
Got my answer.
No other questions?
One more question.
On the
Commissioner Rushing.
system development fee, would the other home have to pay a system development fee as well?
If both of them, once they developed and went through that, they'd go through the process like a new home.
Okay, so even though it's an existing home, they would pay a sewer?
So the existing home would not.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that
The vacant
clarification.
lot created would have to.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I have a question now. How are they going to get to the sewer line? You said it's 1,000 foot away. Are they going to have to acquire right-of-ways from other property owners?
We haven't looked into that level of detail about building it.
Okay.
Dennis?
Commissioner Helms.
Yeah, Mr. Matthews, if you run water down to my property or you run sewer down to this, you have to go through the same process, is that correct? And you'd have to be surveyed, you'd have to be,
You'd have to provide engineering plans.
And
you'd have to
engineer-
survey it and acquire land if you cannot make it fit within the right of way.
okay.
Okay. Thank you, Bjorn. Is there anybody here that wants to speak on this matter? If you would, state your name and address.
Yeah, I just live on I'm applicant, I'm live on the Union County 15 years, moved 2 years ago to Mecklenburg County. Right now, I got 3 boys, and I just need I got one house on the Union, just need to separate the second one, to build 2 brothers, each other, together. Why I need to do the second place, because the land is empty, nothing I can do there. Any question, my team member here too.
Any questions? Commissioner Rushing.
The cost could be quite significant to bring the sewer in. Is that something you would be prepared to do?
Just I need to build another house, just help, like, to move to family because they're together, like, every way.
My name is Dennis Dashenko. I'm the real estate agent for the applicant. We also considered,
If you would step a little closer to the microphone.
sorry, yeah, we also considered maybe doing a perk test and see if we could get the piece perked if it was to approve for, instead of, connecting to the sewer and dealing with the shortage that we're already dealing.
Mr. Matthews.
I've been advised to come to the microphone. So, to be perfectly honest, that's a step that they should take before you would make that decision. If they want to know whether or not septic can work out there, they can apply for that with the environmental health, have them evaluate that and see if it works. I would not advise the board take action and then say, can you have a septic system out there? That's just setting it up for failure, to be honest with you. If that's truly what they're interested in, certainly the board could defer action on this, which you do anyway. You already normally wait until your second meeting before you make decisions. And they can apply and see if septic will work out there. That's just my recommendation for you to consider on this.
Thank you. Anybody else to speak? Any questions of these two gentlemen anymore? Thank you very much. We'll close that public hearing and move on to 21-605, public hearing for CZ 2021-007, Blue Star rezoning.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Manager Watson. Third rezoning for tonight, Conditional Zoning 2021-007, Blue Star rezoning, named on behalf of the applicant. So again, this is a CZ, so a conditional rezoning. There's a lot of conditions. This is a request to rezone 4 parcels totaling nearly 600 acres in Beaufort Township from RA 40 to RA 200 with conditions. This is a request to build a solar farm for electrical power generation. In terms of conditions, you have setbacks of at least 200 feet from outer property boundaries, vegetative buffers, and then some additional text to talk about some areas where there isn't an existing forested area, but there are some existing residences where they would proactively install the vegetative buffer so that it would mature and establish itself by the time disturbance occurred as a part of construction. Construction hours, they limited the hours as it related to evening and weekends. Lighting, restricting outdoor lighting at night. Decommissioning as a part of a lease. They do not own the property. This is a lease of the property owner's land. And vesting rights, requesting 5 years of vesting. In terms of existing conditions, we have a lot of photos because the property has a lot of surface area. You can see it's largely agricultural and forested. There are power lines through the area which are key to being able to connect and distribute the power generated on site. In terms of the site plan, this is the Parkwood School Cluster here for reference. There are wetlands and streams shown through the area. The purple lines are for wildlife transit corridors, so they're not blocked off so that animals can cross through the area, but all of the floodplains and streams and wetlands are delineated and protected. They won't be disturbed as a part of this. The gray hatcheted areas are where the solar panels will be. And then connection is over here, and there might be one over here as well, but the applicant will be able to provide greater detail about that. In terms of development status, you can see the smaller subdivisions that are adjacent to the site, but generally it's undeveloped land, agricultural and forested. Environmental features, the floodplains and wetlands and streams that are throughout the site are shown here, as well as the forested and pasture land. In terms of zoning, largely RA 40 or R40 with some commercial towards the Parkwood and NC 200 intersection. Transportation, there's a funded roundabout project at Parkwood and 200 and Rocky River. Otherwise, there are no funded projects in the area. The land use plan is for rural residential. We don't make specific recommendations for where solar farms would be located, but RA 200 is essentially 5-acre lots, so that is pretty rural in terms of the zoning. Public feedback, approximately 30 people attended the 2 community information meetings that were held in November. There were questions about operating noise, screening, and construction noise at the 2 meetings. We received 1 letter by the planning department requesting berm installation adjacent to the existing residences. That's been accommodated, and 2 residents spoke at the January 4th planning board members, citing a loss of views, agricultural land, and tax subsidies for the solar industry. In terms of staff recommendation and the planning board recommendation, negatives is that you're talking about hundreds of acres of solar panels, which is out of character with the surrounding areas and will take a significant amount of agricultural land from cultivation. However, the use and intensity is consistent with the land use plan. It is a lot of disturbed area. However, the land that's disturbed is at a fairly low intensity. The development is going to be quiet, it's not produce noise, light, traffic impacts. It'll be developed with buffering above what would be required by us. And there is an appraisal that has been submitted, states that the proposed development will not substantially injure the values of adjacent or abutting properties. So we recommended approval, and the planning board recommended approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, the applicant is here to present as well.
Commissioner Simpson.
Bjorn, on your conditions,
Yes, sir.
did I read that upon execution of a power purchase agreement expected late 22 or early 23, did that not come before the request for rezoning? Do you not want that purchase agreement in hand?
They can talk into the mechanics of how they get into these agreements with Duke, but it's essentially a competitive process where they solicit for proposals like this. But, you know, the cause and effect, I'll have to defer to them.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right now, that land is in the agriculture, I'm assuming that it's in farm use or forestry value tax bracket, correct?
I'm not sure, actually.
Well, let's say that it was.
Okay.
When it goes to something like this, what changes about the tax value? Does that tax farm use, present use value go away? Is there a special allocation for solar farms, or what happens to the tax value of that land? Does it go up or down, or remain the same?
I can't answer that question.
Maybe if the petitioner maybe can, I think. I'll just wait till they come up.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Bourne. And now, I'm assuming the applicants are here to speak to us on that. If you would like to come to the podium and state your name and begin the presentation.
Good evening. I'm Tom Terrell with the Fox Rothschild Law Firm. My address is 230 North Elm Street in Greensboro. I'm here tonight representing North Carolina-based Pine Gate Renewables and its wholly owned subsidiary Blue Star Solar. This matter comes to you tonight recommended by your staff. It comes to you with a unanimous recommendation from your planning board. It comes to you with an applicant who has not just met the standards in your law, in your ordinance, but an applicant who has greatly exceeded the standards that you have set. And it comes to you as an application that, for the best I can tell, has met the standards of the neighbors. We have met with the neighbors more than once. We've met with them personally. We have had phone calls with neighbors. This is a company that takes outreach very seriously. We had 2 that showed up at the planning board the first time. We had a couple that showed up at the second planning board meeting to speak. But as best we can determine, this has been worked out with most of the neighbors. Following me tonight, there will be a few speakers, but I want to make sure that you know that some of the landowners will be here. Mr. Howie, Frank Howie, the Purser brothers, Mr. Laney, all of these landowners, this is very unusual, all of these owners are not just local, they are not just citizens who pay their taxes in Union County, but they are multi-generational citizens who have been here over a time measured in decades. I would like to answer a question before I sit down about taxes. Yes, there is, by statute, there is an abatement of 80% of the property tax. But when you compare that with the agricultural exemption that is already on these properties, it is a tremendous increase. It shifts that into a commercial category so that the county over time will be getting substantial amounts more taxes from this land in solar from a user that does not take services or require services from the county. I'm going to be followed by Mr. Tom Delafield. He has some slides. He can give you an overview. He will be followed by Mr. Chris Sandifer. In the meantime, we have a lot of information that we have presented to you. We've given this to you in a notebook. We want to be very informative. We've sent you letters that give you more information. And if you have any questions about this, this is our chance to be here to speak. We ask that you ask us those questions because we have a team of people who can be here to address them. Mr. Delafield.
Good evening. Tom Delafield, 131 East Davie Street, Raleigh, North Carolina. I am Director of Project Development for my family's solar development company, Renewable Energy Services. We're based out of Pittsburgh, North Carolina. I'm here to present the Blue Star Solar Conditional Rezoning application. We originated this project back in 2017, and since then it's undergone a number of iterations. It will be owned and operated by Pine Gate throughout the usable life of the project. It's 31 megawatts in size, which amounts to roughly 300 acres in panels. In context, that energy would power approximately 7,750 homes, or approximately 20% of the city of Monroe. Once produced, that energy is sold to Duke Energy via a competitive procurement system. So, to your question, sir, about why we have not got that utility approval before coming before you this evening, in the competitive procurement, Duke asks that the projects be zoned before they come to them. And so not only is it asked of us, but also we are required to post very significant securities to move forward and participate in that process. So both it's asked for and it's needed on the part of both parties that this project have zoning approval prior to moving forward in the competitive procurement. To the question about taxes, I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but it will provide a significant increase in tax base. And the system has been redesigned to go above and beyond the county's requirements, incorporating large setbacks and visual buffers. This is a look at the western part of the project. As you can see, it has considerable road frontage. Along public rights-of-way, we'll have 30 feet of vegetative buffer. It will be planted where it's not currently existing. Where the site adjoins residential properties, it will have 50 feet of vegetative buffer, again, planted where it's not already existing. And it will have a 200-foot panel setback. And so all of those are well in excess of the county requirements. The vegetative buffers are 3 and 5 times the county requirements respectively, and the setbacks are 4 times the county's requirement. As you can see on the west-hand side of, I believe that's Old Highway Road, those are field delineated wetlands and create additional natural buffer between the project boundaries and the internal portion of the project where the panels will go. Another look at the center here of the project. I want to pause on this slide to note that on the on the north side of the Laney property, which forms the triangle there in the center, that is where the vegetation will be installed early on or prior to the rest, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. I'll go through the rest of this relatively quickly. The only other item to highlight here is the wildlife corridor. That's the pink line that goes through the site in a number of different locations. That's to accommodate wildlife traffic in and around the site. I'll move through these. These are landscape renderings. These are also in your binder. The complete set of them is in your binder, but I leave them in there. Should you have questions about them, I can always return to them. Project development, the development to date, we've done a thorough electrical engineering screen to ensure that this project is sized correctly for the capacity on the transmission grid that is in the area. We've also done a number of environmental studies, including the wetlands delineation I mentioned earlier, and a NEPA screen to confirm that there are no threatened or endangered species habitats within the project area. We've also received North Carolina Utilities Commission approval, and the path forward again is through the Duke Energy RFP. That RFP is for the western half of the Carolinas, where Duke has set a target for the amount of energy that they would like to procure, and essentially everybody with a renewable energy project will bid into that system, and Duke, after analyzing them, selects effectively the low bids. And so one condition of that RFP is that we have to be able to sell electricity to Duke cheaper than they can produce it. So we have to be, again, more efficient at doing it than they can across their blended average of essentially cost of goods sold, what they call, excuse me, what they call their avoided cost. That's the cost of, all their assets combined. Following that, survey, and then we would move to building and electrical permits. Community engagement, we held 2 community meetings throughout this process, one in person at the Bethlehem United Methodist Church on the 10th, and another a week later virtually in case anybody was uncomfortable being in person or was unable to make it. There was a webinar link provided there. In total, approximately 25 folks attended, and common concerns included the view shed and noise that Bjorn mentioned earlier. We feel that we've addressed both of these. Solar farms do not make any audible noise beyond the fence boundaries, and that was confirmed by a Pine Gate representative who went to a system in North Carolina with a nearly identical technology setup and confirmed that with a decibel reader. As for the view shed, we feel that we've addressed that by going far in excess of the county's requirements and additionally planting that vegetation early on where adjoining that residential neighborhood. Additional changes include the increased vegetative buffer along one residential boundary where we missed it, the addition of wildlife corridors. We swapped out some vegetation in that buffer to minimize yard waste for adjoining property owners, and as noted, this special request from the neighbor. The request was for a berm for a visual screen, and after consideration of that request with our civil engineers, Kimley Horn, we decided that while we could not accommodate that, we could do something unique and plant this vegetation early, and that is planting 100% of that 50-foot vegetative buffer, including the bushes and the trees, within 6 months of our approval from Duke Energy. And we anticipate that to be about 24 months prior to construction, and that will give that vegetation time to become established, become more mature, and that means for the landowner increased screening from day one and a superior stormwater system as opposed to a berm, which can create pooling and things of that nature. The resolution of that is that we shook hands and came to an agreement with the neighbor, and that agreement was subsequently blessed by the Planning Commission. We've talked about some of the designs and features and conditions, so I might just move right through this one. The only 2 that haven't been discussed are the pollinator-friendly ground cover. Underneath all the panels, it is grassy. This is not a situation where we come out there and pave 600 acres. There are a couple of inverter pads, but that is the only poured concrete on the site, and those are roughly 6 by 10 pads. I would say there are maybe 9 of those for a site of this size. So I think the state considers this something like 98% pervious surface. Economic benefit to Union County. We anticipate a very significant increase in tax base. It's my understanding, as for the taxes, that the land is removed from agricultural tax deferment, put into a commercial designation. However, the 80% tax abatement is on the personal property, not on the real property. So I believe that the real property is taxed at 100%, and the personal property is the portion that it receives the abatement. In total, it comes out to a significant increase, and as Mr. Terrell mentioned, this increase comes with no additional cost to the county for water and sewer. We don't use up any of that allocation. We're not contributing students to schools. No crime will come from this. No additional traffic. Solar farms typically require approximately 1 vehicle trip per month, whereas the average household contributes about 9 vehicle trips per day. Additional benefits would come with construction. Those would be temporary. Approximately 100 people will be required to work on this site throughout that 9 to 12-month construction period. And we've already made contact with Union County EDC and plan to work with them closely to source as much man and material from local vendors as we can. And that's anything from fencing to timber services to grading services, fuel, sanitation, lodging, food, you name it. We will do our best to source that locally. Putting this in the context of larger trends here in the United States, if you've been following the news, you've seen that energy prices are up considerably. Coal hit an all-time high in late last year. Natural gas prices are increasing with a decrease in production here in the United States, a cold winter in Europe, and the threat of war between Ukraine and Russia. Also, unfortunately, only one nuclear plant is being constructed in the United States for the time being. You can see here the Duke Energy corporate goals. You know, this project is not in opposition to Duke Energy, but rather a benefit to them. I personally believe that what's good for Duke Energy is good for North Carolina, and this project is helping them achieve their stated corporate goals. And those goals are not necessarily first and foremost to save the environment, but it's rather a cost control measure. Duke is facing a number of rising costs, whether it be from coal ash cleanup, an aging workforce, pension obligations, rising construction costs. They're not unique from commodity prices or equipment prices or anything like that. However, as stated earlier, solar is the lowest cost energy in the marketplace, and the more that they can add to their portfolio, the lower they can get their costs. So one here graphic looking at the unsubsidized levelized cost of energy. You can see again here solar down and to the right of all the other sources, and this is sourced from a Wall Street Journal article who got it from Lazard, an analysis firm. As for environmental, this will be permitted through the county and North Carolina DEQ. The stormwater and erosion control standards are no adverse impact, so this project will not negatively impact any adjoining property owners. We'll coordinate with Fish and Wildlife and U.S. Army Corps as needed for stream crossings and things of that nature. And as far as the impacts go, no modules in floodplains, no contamination from equipment, no emissions, no odor, no light, very minimal traffic, and no noise. Operations and maintenance, Pine Gate Renewables will maintain this project. They have experience operating solar farms across the country in over 20 states. On a daily basis, that means 24/7 remote monitoring, ensuring the solar farm is working at its proper capacity. On a monthly basis, that means vegetative maintenance. On an annual basis, they're inspected to ensure the equipment and electrical connections are safe and working properly. And at the end of the life cycle of the solar farm, anticipated to be 35 to 40 years, Pine Gate Renewables will decommission this solar farm, all the equipment both above and below ground, and restore the land to a similar condition. It will be in accordance with the decommissioning plan, which will be kept on file with staff, which will have the cost updates for the decommissioning updated every 5 years to keep those current. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you. So the company is responsible, if it was decommissioned, to go in and remove all the materials and put the land back the way it was found?
That's correct. So we remove all the equipment and stabilize the site so it doesn't, erode away after we leave. We don't, some of this is wooded. We do not replant the trees.
You don't have to plant trees.
Yeah, but that's up to the landowner. They retain ownership throughout, so it's their
So
prerogative.
it's a lease to you of the land,
That's correct.
and they retain ownership. The farm use value, now you said there's an abatement. Explain that to me just a little bit more. So you have you're paying not full amount, or you are?
So it's my understanding that the land is currently being taxed at 80% of its, or excuse me, 20% of its appraised value through that agricultural tax deferment. When we construct the solar farm, we will pay the rollback taxes, or 3 years of those abated taxes, and then bring the land up to full taxation. And it will be the real property, i.e. the dirt, will be taxed at its full appraised value, and the personal property, the system, the solar farm, is what receives the 80% abatement based on the intensity of its use.
But the landowner, they're paying the taxes, or you are?
We are paying the taxes.
The full taxes?
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Delafield, the 80% abatement, that is on business personal property, right? You've got real property, which is the land and anything that's considered affixed to the land, and then there's the solar panels that would be considered what, business personal property?
Correct.
Okay. So that's what gets the 80% abatement. And as business personal property, that would be property that depreciates year after year in terms of...
The 80% is on the real estate, is the ad valorem, but the personal property, the panels and the equipment is 100%.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I have that backwards?
It was a little backwards.
Sorry. I apologize about that.
Okay, so there's no abatement on the business personal property, the solar panels?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Commissioner Rushing.
The wildlife management aspect of it, you know, around the solar farms that I've seen near, that I live near, there's a fence that goes around, seems like the complete. So what you would do is probably in the wetland areas, have a channel, or have no fence there at all.
Exactly right. So yeah, like pulling it back to these looks at the site plan, you can see that we've installed the wildlife corridors basically along the wetland boundaries, or, you know, that go right through it. And that will mean that the fencing will be on either side of the wetlands. It will not be across the wetlands, if that makes sense. Because the wetlands and things in stream areas are where wildlife typically traverse anyway, so it's a natural location for them.
Will that be wooded?
Yes, it will.
Any other questions for this gentleman? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Christopher Sandifer. Mr. Sandifer has worked with Duke Energy. He is a farmer. He owns a solar farm himself. He's also an electrical engineer, and he has more knowledge about this than any human being I think I have met. Chris.
Thank you for that exaggerated introduction. My name is Chris Sandifer. Thank you for allowing us to speak tonight to the board and to you, Chairman. I have offices at 3118 Green Road in Spring Hope, North Carolina. That's Nash County. As I said, I did work for Duke for 30 years. The last 10 years of that was the interconnection of renewable sources, and with the hydro, it started off, and then it wound up being some solar. So I've been I'm an electrical engineer, and I'm licensed in the state of North Carolina and most of the states on the East Coast, and a few others as well. I'm a licensed electrical contractor. I've installed interconnections for these facilities. I don't particularly, or I have, but I don't normally install panels. It's just not, I do the high voltage stuff, 25,000 to 230,000 volt. That's kind of where my sweet spot is. And I serve on the Nash County Planning Board, where we've approved 38 utility scale solar farms to date, and pretty much got what we're going to get. Our lines are pretty much filled with solar, so unless somebody's got a bunch of money and they want to upgrade the lines, we're probably not going to be approving very many more. But I am a farmer, and but before I go into that, I just want us to state without hesitation, without any equivocation, that this facility is installed the way we've designed it will not impact the safety and the health and safety of the residents of Union County. And that there's no new technology going in here. Solar panels have been around 50 years. The rest of the technology has been around longer than that. In North Carolina, we've gone through hurricanes, we've gone through floods, we've gone through tornadoes, we've gone ice storms, we've had just about every kind of weather that you can have over the last 15 to 20 years when these things became more ubiquitous. And to date, there's been no environmental impact, no negative impact to the soil or to the neighbors. This is a safe design and a safe way to produce renewable energy. So, and if there's any question on that, I'd be glad to answer that. But I heard some testimony at the planning board. I just wanted to spend a couple minutes addressing. I normally just talk about health and safety and harmony, but I want to mention a couple of things. In the 1980s, I bought a farm. I got married. I said no. I got married and bought a farm in Nash County, where I live now. Raised my family. But I remember trying to farm. I was still working at CP&L at the time, but I was still farming. And I went to church with a guy who was a World War II pilot, flew B-17s to the Pacific, and we were pretty good friends. And I must have said something, might have been a paracrest. I don't even remember what it was about now, but I remember what he told me. He said, Chris, you got to remember, you're farming the programs, not the land. And that stuck with me because it kind of changed my paradigm, the way I looked at things. And we're talking about subsidies. I'm going to just tell you the subsidies I got. And I pay a lot of taxes. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you. But I've gotten cost shares. I've gotten tax credits. I've gotten CRP payments directly from the state government and federal government for not growing plants. I enjoy present use, just like these farms do. My vehicle tags, my inspections, they're cheaper than everybody else's because and I get price supports, and there's no price supports on this electricity. I heard this, okay, this is not a free market, but in actuality, it is a free market. And I'm not against subsidies for farmers, not a bit. I enjoy them, I appreciate it. I don't want to buy my food that comes from China, my milk, and I don't want to have to get my grain from Russia. I'm sorry. If it takes that for us to have reliable food, fiber, and fuel source, then I'm all for the subsidies that our farmers get. But I did a little research, and I looked at Union County's tax rate, and it's 7.3 mils. That's according to your website. It may have changed, I don't know. But I also looked at Gaston County's, and it's 8.7%, or 8.7 mils. They're 19% higher on the other side of Mecklenburg County than we are here on the eastern side of, and you say, well, what difference does that make? Well, I'm just assuming the cost for county services is the same here as over there. It's not that far away, just different sides of Mecklenburg County. I'm not taking Mecklenburg County into account. But the Gaston County manager said that the average tax revenue per household covers less than 1/2 of the cost of the services received by that household in that county over there, which pays more taxes than they pay here. Now, I could not find that on your website. I don't know how much county services cost per household. I don't know. But I know what your tax rates are, and I know they're a lot less than that, and they can't cover them. So when he was talking about putting a solar farm on here, which uses no services, and whatever tax rate, I mean, if it goes up 5 times on the land and goes up, who knows what it's going to go up to on the personal property. You don't have to buy one desk. You don't have to pay one school teacher. You're not going to have to get one policeman. You don't have to hire anybody for this. This is his revenue. That's what we're finding in Nash County. I asked those guys. I said, "What's the bad part?" He said, "We haven't figured out what the negative part of it is yet, and we've been putting them in for 10 years." So, that's one type of subsidy. And now I'm talking about, and I heard some other things about the cost of electricity, and Mr. Delafield mentioned this, but I'm going to give you some numbers from United States Department of Energy. The DOE says that solar, and this is the levelized cost. Now, solar costs a lot of money to install, but so far we haven't been charged for the sunlight that lights up these panels that produce electricity. And assuming we don't get a charge for that, the cost, the levelized cost, which includes the variable cost, the fixed cost, the capitalization cost, everything to put them in, per megawatt hour is $32.78. The cost for combined cycle is $37. That's the next look. There's several in between there, but that's the next popular one that utilities use. But that's dependent on the fuel cost. These are for 2020. I don't have the 21 values; they haven't come out yet. But I'll update the sheet when that happens. But if we go into a little shooting war over in the Mideast or somewhere, those costs, that natural gas cost is going to shoot up. The price of the sunlight's going to stay the same. And so it's going to have a tendency to stabilize the price. I'll give you some other ones. The price of nuclear is $69, over twice as much as a solar farm. The price for a coal is $72.78. Now this is from Department of Energy. That's not me. You can go right at their website and pull these same numbers. In fact, I'll pull that chart right off of their website. So I'm just telling you about the levelized cost. This is the cheapest way to produce, and plus it does not have the emissions and everything. I was going to mention, said the land was less efficient and we're taking all the farmland, and I heard all that. We lose, across the southeast, we lose 5 times as much farmland every year to, guess what? Subdivisions, not solar farms. Subdivisions, that's permanent. Solar farms, 40 years, if you want to take it out, you can pull this stuff out and the land will be in better shape than it is today if it's in row crops. If you use the chemicals like I use, it would be in better shape. It takes 147 acres of mature trees, 147 acres, to offset the carbon footprint of a 1 megawatt coal plant. 147. So 1 acre solar farms would produce the same amount of electricity as what it would take 147 acres of trees to offset. So if you want to look at how efficient they are, and how that comes from the United States Department of Agriculture. That's where that number comes from. I know we use some corn for fuel, and there's subsidies and price supports for that, but it takes 330,000 gallons of water for 1 acre of corn. Solar farms use 0 gallons of water per acre per year. That 330,000 gallons that could be going into corn is going into the ground and refurbishing the aquifers and making the wells around the area, not, especially if it's developed, so that they'll have water to pump into the residents. I'm going to try to be brief here. Here's another. This one came from the EPA. And you may think that this is a conspiracy. Maybe it is. I don't know. I have no way of proving these numbers or not proving them. I'm just reporting to you the numbers that come from the EPA here and the USDA and Department of Energy or whoever. And they say that a 1 megawatt, and that's what I've been trying to talk about, 1 megawatt. This is a 31 megawatt plant, but 1 megawatt in North Carolina has the effect of reducing the health costs $40,000 because of clean air or whatever. That's what the EPA, that's the number they came up with. So for every megawatt, so you take 31 times 40, you're talking about over $1 million in reduced health costs, according to EPA, for using a renewable energy like solar as opposed to a non-renewable fossil fuel. I also heard that the land in North Carolina used 10 to 12 acres as opposed to maybe some other place that only uses 4 to 6 acres. That might be a little exaggeration, but even if it isn't, even if it's 100% true, we see exactly what's happening. There's a big piece of property. On 300 acres of it is being used for panels. There are delineations for wetlands. You got all these wildlife corridors. We got all these setbacks that are, well, that's not panels. That's actually a place where they put pollinator plants. That's a place that actually beautifies the landscape, if you will. So that might be true, but just so if you hear that tonight, I want you to understand that okay, it's not that we're less efficient or our panels are less efficient. It's the way we follow the contours of the land and taking advantage and giving. So basically, it breaks up a big plant into a bunch of little small ones by having all these corridors. I can tell I'm running out of patience here, but I want to mention one more thing. It was a comparison to the California rates, which is one of the most overregulated states in the country. But to compare them, they have 5 times as much non-renewables as they have solar. They're not 100% solar out there. They might like to be, but they're not because they're regulated to death. But they import 23% of their energy. California can't even produce their own energy. They have to buy it from other people. I mean, and other states. So, and that came from the California Energy Commission, those numbers. But anyway, I just want to, if you hear these numbers later on, you hear this side of it, and so you'll be able to evaluate and make your own decision what you want to do on that. And I'll be glad to answer any question on health and safety or the subsidies or anything else.
Commissioner Rushing.
You gave me some interesting things to think about. Our tax rates was 73 cents per hundred. Now it's 58.8. So it's gone down some with our revaluation that we had. Is that what you were figuring the 50,000 a year on? Last year's tax rate, maybe, regardless. Is it normal for like Duke Energy or a private energy company to not pay property taxes on the whole parcel, the land, the equipment, and all the other things involved there? Is that something that the state could change, and is that something that you could weather?
Is that something like a weather? Is that what you?
Is that something that, like, okay, for example, let's say that the state legislature, if they could change something with this to where the whole property was taxed on the value of the property. So instead of being taxed at the agriculture or forestry rate, the state legislature changed and said, no, we're going to tax it on the full value of the land, $10,000 an acre, or $8,000 an acre, whatever it is there. Is that something that would make it unprofitable and where you would have to get out before the contract would be over?
That's probably above my pay grade to understand that. What I would say this, it's going to be a negotiation between the county assessor and the project to decide, how much of this land would actually be put into. In other words, they could just decide it's defense. They may decide, and I've seen it that way. They may decide the whole property has to go up, but a lot of times this is a natural demarcation between this segment of property and this segment of property. They'll allow this to stay in some type of agriculture, especially if it's still being plowed or it's still growing trees or something. But if it's a wetland that just kind of wanders up through it, typically the ones I've seen that becomes part of the property that is not subject to deferment anymore. Does that answer your question?
I'm thinking that the whole parcel, like I said, can the state legislature do it? And if they can't do it, then it's not a point. But if the state legislature would step in at some point and say, okay, these solar farms are energy producers like a nuclear power plant, does a nuclear power plant pay full taxes on the value of the nuclear power plant?
Right. Well, I think that of course we don't have any nuclear plants. So, I mean, we got them, but we don't. Duke's last one was put on in the 80s, by the time I bought my farm, so.
I can research that. I'll look and see what that, I'll go research that.
But what I'm just saying is that they're very expensive to put in too. And if they're having to pay the full ride for all the nuclear, that might be one of the determinants that stop Duke from, okay, we can't go this way anymore, because they're looking at cash flow, just like the county's looking at cash flow. And if they can't afford to, you know, to do it, they just won't do it.
Yeah, if my energy bill is going down, I'd feel better about that.
You're right. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we have some of the property owners speak, I want Mr. Logan Secord with Pine Gate Renewables to answer Mr. Rushing's question. I think there is some information about what the legislature is doing, can do, and how companies would respond. Logan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name's Logan Secord. I live at 110 Bear Creek Lane, Asheville, North Carolina. I wanted to address your question. So the answer is yes. The state legislature currently determines the tax laws. So for example, in South Carolina, they have a different setup. They have what's called a FILO, a fee in lieu of tax, and that's negotiated at the county level, which says, you know, basically I would come to you guys and say, let's work out a deal that is best for everybody. North Carolina is a state determined abatement rate. So yes, that is definitely possible. It is within the parameters of kind of the current discussion is that 20%. I do want to highlight, though, the utility of thinking about it in such a way. So if the solar farm isn't there, and some of our landowners will be speaking about this, the land will be developed otherwise. And those developments, as Mr. Sandifer has said, will also pay taxes, but they will also increase the sewage, and they will add kids to the schools. I have friends in Waxhaw, they tell me all the schools are completely full. It's a heavy burden that this land will bear if it is not solar. So we will be paying, going from $268,000 over the lifetime of this land to over $2 million. And that's $2 million that's pure cash that can be used for all of these other things that the community will need. Happy to elaborate on that and any other questions you guys may have. I'm here to represent Pine Gate.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
We have several of the property owners here. Mr. Frank Howey would like to speak to you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Frank Howey from Monroe, North Carolina, 1916 Wolf Pond Road. I'd just like to ask each and every one of you to support this. This project doesn't bring more traffic. It's not students to go to school, as was mentioned earlier about the schools being overcrowded. And I know I've talked to y'all in the past, and you know, property rights are important. As a native of Union County, in fact, my family's lived here longer than Union County's existed. We used to be in Mecklenburg County before Union County was created out of parts of Mecklenburg and Anson County. And my children are here with me tonight, Trey and Ella Howey. And I would just like to ask each and every one of y'all to support this project because I think it's good for the taxpayers. And one analogy I'd like to share with you, and I know all of us are going through this burden, when we see our fuel tank on empty or our propane tank behind our house on empty, we don't like the price to refill it. Once you build this solar, there's never any more fueling. It's a one-time upfront cost with no more cost. And eventually, you know, it saves all the residents in Union County on power down the road for generations. And there's nobody here speaking against this. I did see Representative Brody, and I talked to him about this. He does live close to this project. But, and I have 3 other solar projects in North Carolina, and I've never had any complaints from any of them. And, as a farmer and landowner, I think people who own property, when they're trying to do something that's better for the community, you should support it. And I ask each and every one of you to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stan Purser. I represent Purser Brothers Holdings. This is my brother Jeff. I live at 132 Brackenberry Lane, Charlotte, North Carolina. Our property is 209 acres of this parcel. Represents about 35% of the property. This property has been owned by my family for over 30 years. It is now in a LLC, which Jeff and I are the managers of that LLC. We got that after our parents passed away. Our parents both were born and raised in Union County. Our uncle Clayton, J. Clayton Purser, was the principal at Parkwood High. And I think he was known very well around this area. We have a lot of relatives that still live in this area. My mother was a York. There's a lot of Yorks here. My daddy obviously was a Purser. The Duncans, they came from the York side. They're relatives, and some Haglers, and we're relatives to the McGees, a name you've probably heard also. So we're not aliens to this area. I'm in Charlotte, Jeff's in Cornelius. The reason we're here, though, is that I heard before somebody talking about the lineage, about the founding fathers and all. There is no more property. We have this property, and our parents taught us to be good stewards of what the Lord's given you. And so, in our opinion, this is the best use of this property. We can still maintain ownership of it, and the integrity of the land will actually increase. That's already been mentioned. But it will stay in the Purser family. I will say this, I do think they'll be a good neighbor. I don't think anybody will ever have to be called out there at night for disturbing the peace or anything like that. I think they'll be a great asset to the neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
I'm Jeff Purser. I'm one of the owners, managers, Purser Brothers Holdings 1 LLC. Stan is my brother. We are for the project. I've been involved with every step of the way of the development. I have found that the solar company is well represented. They do what they said they will do. We've been very well informed about the goings-on about it. And I attended the first planning board meeting. I heard some concerns, and I did a little research. Part of it involved watching a documentary on solar wind farms, which is I found to be very disturbing, which caused me to dig a little deeper. And upon looking up the solar, I was very impressed. I was impressed with what it will do as far as producing electricity, the life of it, the cleanliness of it, lack of sound, lack of problems that it would present to the neighbors around it, and then to be able to decommission it and put it back in a good state. As my brother said, and I would like to emphasize, we're going to continue to own this property, at least for the foreseeable future. It isn't a company. The stockholders will decide the futures. But our children, in all likelihood, would inherit this, and we would want the property to be turned back to them in good condition. So we would not want to have something put on this property that would harm the property, nor the neighbors. For, again, whenever I heard some concerns and I saw the documentary on the wind farms, that was very disturbing to me, for I would not have put a wind farm out here after having seen what I saw. I can lay down and go to sleep at night and feel real good about the surrounding neighbors knowing the solar farm's here. So I would ask you to approve this solar farm, and it would be good for future generations. Thank you.
Members of the commission, I realize that took a little bit of your time tonight. We are grateful for your patience. This company is trying to invest $80 million in your economy, so I hope that you will have put up with that for this last 30 minutes. If there is any question that you have, if there's any hesitation that you have, this is our opportunity. And we ask that you ask that question before the hearing is closed and before we sit down.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Might we get a sample decommissioning plan, that perhaps you all have submitted for prior projects?
There should be a decommissioning plan that is in the notebook that we sent.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes. It's a standard decommissioning plan. People ask about that sometimes. The cost is in putting the solar panels in. I don't know how many of you have agricultural backgrounds, but if you ever had a tractor with the hydraulic arms on the back, they have equipment that just does that, like you're taking up a fence post. You pop out the panels and you just you pull those posts out of the ground, and it's very systematic. It takes no time. The cost to decommission are very, very low. So that's generally not an issue, and the recycling markets for those are very strong, even in today's economy. So the chances of an issue with decommissioning are infinitesimally small. A home that is built has no decommissioning plan whatsoever.
Commissioner Simpson.
I don't have a question, just a comment. I just wanted to share with these two gentlemen that spoke before you. As a 72 graduate of Parkwood High School, I had a personal relationship with J. Clayton Purser, and I won't elaborate any further on that.
I saw you smile when he said that. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your time.
All right, I'm sure there's some people here tonight that want to comment on this. We don't have a sign-up sheet, so. Mr. Brody?
I did sign up on a sheet there. I don't know if you've seen it. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Mark Brody, 5315 South Rocky River Road, Monroe. I am here not in my legislative capacity, but as a private citizen. I stand in opposition to this rezoning. We all know that our spending addictive nation will eventually force us into financial reckoning. We don't know when this will happen, but we do know it will, seeing that every president and Congress we have had in the last 20 years cannot break the deficit spending habit. It's not if, but when. With that in mind, I come before you in opposition to this project for two specific reasons. To start, the large capacity solar generating industry that creates these solar farm projects are headed for the chopping block as we are forced as a nation to cut back expenses. The simple reason is because they require subsidies, federal, state, and ratepayer, in order to survive. We have done this before with the ethanol fad. Even though we are stuck with the residual because of some well-situated congressman, the bulk of that industry has dried up. The viability of these projects will not reach their estimated end of useful lifetime schedule, and if we don't put a stop to the proliferation of these projects, our county and state will be littered with them. I come before you along with the thousands of citizens in Union County that believe this to be true, both in our national finances and the ultimate fate of these projects. Second, as much of this is found in the written brief that I believe was sent to each one of you, there are several areas of concern that I will address, but only three. The first issue is these projects have not having any effect on property values. The petitioner's argument that there is no effect completely defies logic. I also believe their analysis is skewed. In other words, they sought after and have gotten the analysis they needed and had neglected to publish any information about local agents or dissenting opinions. Second, has to deal with the petitioner's contention that this project does not affect agricultural land and production. I went through this in my brief, but it's important to note that along with ag land loss goes revenue loss and job loss. And third, the most important in my opinion, the decommissioning process. I hope you had a chance to read the failed amendment that I submitted to House Bill 951 on the House floor. This was clearly an effort put in place to fully fund decommissioning process in North Carolina for all future solar farms. Do you know who adamantly opposed this amendment? The solar farm industry, and oddly enough, the environmental extremists in the General Assembly. Besides, I also strongly challenge their cost analysis. To end, I respectfully ask you to oppose this rezoning. As a request, if the petitioners ask for rebuttal time, I ask that I'll also get equal time, because at the planning board hearing, they did misstate issues that I brought up, and I could not rebut for a vote. I thank you, and I stand for questions. And might I add, I appreciate the schedule that you're on. I know half hour versus 3 minutes really can't get a lot in there. That's why I wrote, but I didn't want to overburden you with a lot of literature too. So I certainly appreciate, if you want to discuss anything further, I certainly would appreciate questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Brody. What do you see as some of the objections and hidden costs to decommissioning of solar farms?
Well, first of all, is the commitment itself. I had a chance to read through both documents of decommissioning, and I asked myself, who's financially liable? There is nobody financially liable. Now, mind you, and I hate to jump in with legislative stuff, but when we write something, we have to put everything in there that's pertinent, because after it's signed, after it's to the governor, we can't go back and accept a kiss and a promise from somebody. They need to put down exactly what they're going to do. The other aspect is on calculating the cost. It's very interesting that you saw the decommissioning cost analysis on page 5 of 6. For example, they have 40 years from now, because read the fine print at the bottom. 40 years from now, the cost to remove the panels is $77,000. That's about 75 cents a piece. Even today, if you had 77,000, you could not remove those panels for 75 cents a piece. In addition to that, there's removing and dismantling and removing rack posts, 172,000. Gosh, maybe I'm speaking with some experience of construction knowledge, but I know that you cannot take that stuff out at $2 a piece, take it out and reclaim the land. So basically what boils down to is, according to the amendment that I proposed, they have to put up a certain financial instrument that will increase in value equal to the cost of the estimated reclaim process in the end. That way, if they leave, the landowner can make the claim against it and take it out. If they do it themselves, they can use the money. If the county gets it in foreclosure, now mind you, we're talking about a long time from now. Interesting enough, the $2 million that he said in 40 years, you'll have $280 million. Representative Helms, what are you going to do with that amount of money when you're 120 years old? You know how they do, they always Congress does it too, they estimate in 10-year groups, so it makes the numbers look big, but really in the individual, year by year, I say the agricultural revenue and loss equals, if not maybe exceeds, the amount of property. The other thing I want to put in perspective, and forgive me because I do, only have a short period of time, in 3 minutes, but you are elected to decide what's best for the county. And you look to that monster in Raleigh to see, okay, what kind of stuff you're going to do to me. I'm elected to take a broad picture of the state of North Carolina as well as what Congress and the agencies are going to do. And I look at this and said, this is the fad du jour of energy, just like ethanol was. And one day it's going to end, because one day we're going to wake up in this country and say, oh my gosh, what have we done? We got to cut back. And you guys know this. I've talked to a lot of you before, never on this subject, but just in general. You know this is coming. And if this comes and these things pull out, what are you going to do? Another interesting fact, when I develop a lot for building a house on, I have to take a personal financial responsibility for the erosion control of that property. Personal responsibility. I would suggest that you go and you require them to take a personal responsibility too, and see how far they're going to run and how fast they're going to run away from that. Sorry, that was a long answer of a short question, but I covered a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, to clarify, we offered to bond this. We offered twice. And we will come here tonight and we will invite you to impose a bond as a condition on this site. This is not an issue. Pine Gate does this. Other companies do this all the time. But I think your staff will confirm we have offered. That's all we can do is to offer.
Sir,
Yes.
the decision will not be made tonight
I know.
on any of the zoning hearings that we've had, so.
Just wanted you to know that we have stepped up on that issue.
Yes, sir.
May I respond to that?
Uh,
I have to have my rebuttal because they were giving rebuttals. What I have to say on that is that you have to be very careful what they're going to do. This bond has to last the whole duration of the estimated project whenever it ends. So if they're going to offer something and let you put in a T-bill, for example, you're going to you fall far and far behind. And if this county takes it over for some odd reason, because these guys bail out, it's a business, they can declare bankruptcy, they don't have to follow any kind of written rule or written agreement. They're bankrupt. They leave, goes back to the homeowners or property owners. If they can't do it, you have to foreclose on the property and you own it. And guess who pays the taxpayers? So I'd be very careful if you're going to accept something like that. You tie all the knots and get everything squared out before you do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Rushing.
Representative Brody, I asked the question earlier, like, who determines, we determine the tax value through the legislature. When did the legislature allow a value, and if like a present use value for this, a subsidy value or whatever? And then, so could that be changed? And if it's changed, is that going to be saddled onto the landowner? Because they're not paying the taxes right now. But if anything changes with that, what protections are there for the landowners that are leasing this land that they don't have to cover that increased cost?
Well, to answer your first question, the law that was put in place was in 2007, Senate Bill 3, 5 years before I got in the legislature. But to answer your question, the other question, yes, the legislature can change it. But let me bring you to some very down the political nuts and bolts. They ain't going to do it. Me and another ag chair proposed legislation to increase the 80% to 60%. They fought it like crazy. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. All those things, that's not going to happen as long as we have the solar industry shelling out bundles of campaign cash. It's not going to happen in here. So to my disappointment, I have to tell you that. It's a political reality. Solar is a legislative construct. It wasn't brought in by the industry because it's a losing money industry. It needs subsidies. It's created by the legislature, and it's guided by the legislature, and the amount of money that keeps these folks afloat, the level of rate is governed by the legislature. And you're not going to, political reality is you're not going to do it. You have to decide at some point, in my opinion, that we don't want to take that risk. 5, 10 years from now, we don't want to take that risk. You know, let him go to Nash County where he's got a lot of them. Can you imagine if this industry falls apart and what Nash County is going to look like? So, thank you.
Let me say something right here. I think this could probably go on for a long time. The commissioners, I have seen us work very diligently, and these two gentlemen sitting over here, our legal counsel, I think there'll be, when we bring this back up for a decision, there'll be a very eloquent debate of the guarantees. In other words, I could see this going on to midnight. He said. So, Frank, go ahead and speak, and then I'm going to ask if there's anybody else that hadn't spoke that wants to speak.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I just wanted to follow up on Representative Brody's comments. He talked about ethanol being a failed industry. It's not a failed industry. We're at just about all-time high production of ethanol. We even export ethanol to other countries. And 3 of y'all have been in agriculture, and you understand that the byproducts from ethanol is a great feed source for the livestock industry. So he is incorrect about that. I wanted to correct that. And the company, I've dealt with them, and that was a concern of mine, the decommissioning. They were willing to bond it, and they still will, to make sure that it's decommissioned properly. And I think Mr. Brody didn't take into account the reason the cost is so low. It's just like a chicken house. When you go to tear it down, you sell the tin, you sell the rafters. There's income selling the used components that offset the cost of decommissioning. I don't think Mr. Brody thought of that. And I talked to Mr. Brody for about a half hour a few weeks ago about this project. And he told me he was against it, and I respect that. But in the same conversation, he told me he'd like to put solar on his house to reduce his electricity cost. So just keep that in mind, gentlemen. Thank you.
Anybody else that hadn't spoken on this? If not, you've already been up.
But I did sign up to speak.
Okay, come on.
Thank you for taking my comments. Whenever I was hearing Mr. Brody talking, he was talking about the decommissioning and about how much it was going to cost and everything, and what a burden this was going to be on the state. And I'm like thinking, whose property is he talking about? It's our property. And I want all the commissioners to know that we accepted a contract. The contract has confidentiality built into it, but it addresses this. And we submitted it to our attorneys. They looked at it, and we don't have a bit of concern. But as far as the decommissioning, I think that's really between the property owners and the solar farm. And we're satisfied to that. So I want you to understand that.
Good
Thank
point.
you.
All right, if there's no other comments, I will close the public hearing on this rezoning hearing. And now I will open public hearing on 2/3 general obligation bonds for law enforcement, 22013.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. If you recall from our last board meeting, we did the presentation on Series 2022 2/3 general obligation bonds, and each bond order was introduced to you at that time, as well as a resolution adopted stating certain facts regarding interest cost. So the first public hearing for this tonight, you do have 6. It's because North Carolina state law requires you to hold a public hearing for each bond order that is adopted. So the first public hearing is for public safety and law enforcement bonds. This is to fund the Patton Avenue radio shop renovations, Union County Jail lock project enhancements, additional funding, Union County Jail to replace 3 commercial washers and dryers, as well as the Union County Jail block renovations. Total estimated interest cost for this portion of the bond is about $1.3 million. True interest cost, today's market, we are estimating at 1.95%. I'll be glad to answer any questions about this particular bond.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you. Anybody want to speak from the public? Okay. We'll close the public hearing on the public safety and law enforcement and move on to the 22-014 public hearing for 2/3 general obligation bonds, library.
So this particular portion of the bond is to fund the main library replacement of the metal architectural painters there, as well as additional funding for the Southwest Union Regional Library for FF&E for $210,000. Total estimated interest cost for this portion of the bond is $240,000. Again, same true interest cost, estimated today's market value is 1.95%. I'd be glad to answer any questions about that.
Any questions? Any comments from the audience? Okay, I'll close the public hearing for that particular bond on the library. 22-015, public hearing for 2/3 general obligation bonds, parks and recreation.
This portion of the Series 22 2/3 general obligation bonds will fund the Cane Creek Park Camp Store for $600,000. Jesse Helms Park will have park amenity improvements for $500,000. And this will build a new event center support building at the new Ag Event Center for $800,000. Total estimated interest cost is $585,000. Again, true interest cost in today's market value is 1.95%. We're glad to answer any questions about these projects and bonds.
Any questions? Any comments from the audience on the Parks and Recreation bond? Okay, I'll close the public hearing for the general obligation bonds for Parks and Recreation. 22-016, public hearing for 2/3 general obligation bonds on public buildings.
This particular portion of the bond will fund the Government Center and Judicial Center building envelope repairs, Phase 1 and 2, for $1,350,000, as well as begin Phase 2 renovations of the historic courthouse for $1,725,000, and will fund the renovations at the Union County Progress Building. Total estimated interest cost is $1,156,000. I'd be glad to answer any questions about this particular bond.
Any questions? Okay, any comments from the audience? Okay, close the public hearing on public buildings. 22-017, public hearings for 2/3 general obligation bonds for Community College and South Piedmont Community College.
This particular portion of the bond is going to fund the access controls at the main building at South Piedmont on Old Charlotte Highway, as well as provide additional funding to Building A to complete the renovations there for $3,840,000. Total estimated interest cost for this portion of the bond is $1,600,000. Also here tonight is Michelle Brock, the Finance Director for South Piedmont Community College. Be glad to answer any questions that you may have about this portion of the bond.
Any comments or questions? I'm sorry. Okay, any comments from the audience? I'll close the public hearing on bonds for the community college and South Piedmont Community College. 22018, public hearing for 2/3 general obligation bonds for education, Union County Public Schools.
This particular portion of the bond will fund the design work for Forest Hills High School and East Elementary for $4.9 million. Estimated interest cost for this portion of the bond is $1,510,000. Tonight, also here representing Union County Public Schools is their Director of Facilities, Colin Moore. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about this particular
Any
portion
questions?
of the bond.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it my understanding that this basically recoups for the county what was fronted last year to the Union County Public Schools for these design costs?
That is correct. At that time, you approved an advance loan to the school CIP fund. At this particular time, though, however, they have not spent hardly any of this money. They are just beginning the design work. So they spent about $40,000 that we would have to recoup. But when these bonds are issued, that advance loan is forgiven and moved back to the general fund.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Any comments from the audience? All right, I'll close the public hearing for the Union County Public Schools. Beverly, it was a very professional, I like the interest cost down at the bottom. It was very informative. I felt like I was buying a car or something.
Thank you.
Okay, on the consent agenda, before I take a motion to approve it, I'm going to remove 22-030 and remove it from consent and put it at the last item before manager comments. Any other adjustments to the consent? If not, need a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the consent as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a
5-minute,
break? Yeah.
5-minute recess. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess and be right back. I just didn't want to be the first one to ask for it. excuse me, pardon me just a minute. Okay, on the business section, 22-010, Mr. Matthews.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners. Obviously, you've got a fairly long agenda, a number of presentations on here. In the interest of time, we would offer that we would move the Yadkin update until your next board meeting. Obviously, we're prepared to do that tonight if you want, but that could help you with, the interest of getting other items where you're able to take time to think about those and ask your questions. So we'll make that offer if the board would like to consider
It's
that.
just going to be information only.
It is information. We're not asking for any decisions.
Have a motion to move that to our next meeting. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Okay, 22.
Real quick,
Yes.
that is appropriate, right? We can do that, and nobody in the audience was here to hear that spectacular presentation, right? Oh, yeah, thank you. That's what I want to make sure.
22-011, FY 22 short line water extension program applicant selection recommendations. Mr. Shutak,
Good evening, Commissioners.
turn your volume up a little bit because my batteries are running low.
All right, will do. So, this evening, we're going to talk about the short water line extension program. Appreciate deferring the Yadkin presentation till next time. Save us about a half an hour's time tonight. So thank you for that. But before we get going on the short line extension update here, the first thing I wanted to do was introduce Miss Alina Young. She comes to us as a recent hire, came to us in mid-October, so she's been here about 90 days, and she comes to us from Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, did a lot of work with related to the BP oil spill and project remediation and restoration projects like that. So, and you may be wondering why I'm introducing her. We hired her on to take Thomas Mann's position, who was hired as a project manager to run the short line program. So you'll be seeing a lot more of Alina as well as Thomas.
Mr. Shutak, I've come to respect and like you tremendously. I did read yesterday there's 8,000 comedians in North Carolina unemployed, so the jokes, they got to be better than 30 minutes moved from one to the other.
All right, so without further ado, just going to move right on past that. So we're going to talk about the new program, just a brief overview of the newly adopted program. We'll talk about the applications we received as part of that new program, how we evaluated those recommended projects, and then what we're asking the board for tonight. And we're going to take away a few lessons that we learned from this first year. So the new program, you all approved that back in August of '21. Annual budget of $5 million. We opened the application period about 30 days following approval of the program. So it ran from September 15th through mid-December, so we had it open for 90 days. And applicants were ranked based on highest score. The cost share, as you know, is on a sliding scale, so it varies depending on certain point totals. And in order to be eligible for the program, you have to be an existing resident. It can be a vacant lot with an active building permit, or it can be a non-residential use as long as the service size is an inch or smaller. So why do we do this program? Really what we're trying to do is address public health concerns. And you'll see that as I go through the scoring in a little bit. But really this has to do with both water quality and quantity. The other thing we want to do is ensure that we're being fiscally responsible. So we evaluate the economic factors, participation, cost, system benefit, and then the overall long-term effects on the system. So the scoring criteria that were adopted, again, strong focus on water quality and quantity. So that's 60% of the total score, broken down whether you have major contaminants, minor contaminants if you have a quantity issue with your well. And then 40% of the score is related to economic factors such as potential customers per mile, cost per customer, participation rate, and system benefit. So you don't just get a check in the box, it's a graded scale, so depending on a percentage of the application, points for water quality if you have a major contaminant range from 0 to 25. If it's a minor contaminant, it's 0 to 15. If you have water quantity issues or production issues with the well, that ranges from 0 to 20. Customers per mile, again, this is a sliding scale, so it's 0 to 15. And then you can see the cost per customer was really more of a minor factor. So just because a project's expensive doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. So other things we looked at were, as I said, the participation rate and then the system benefit. And this is really the only one that's a binary decision. It's a yes or no. So we also had adopted cost sharing and fees. The meter fee presently is $272.50. A system development fee is at $3,200. And the cost share ranges anywhere from $750 up to $3,000. So how is that cost share graded out? So the participation rate, the higher percentage of participation, the more points you earn. More customers per mile, the more points you earn. And that translates into the higher points you earn, the lower your fee. So it's incentivizing people to participate in the program, collaborate with their neighbors, and make sure that it's a viable extension. Just taking a look at how this would shake out, just from a minimum maximum, trying to understand what those bookends are. So at the minimum cost, you'd be looking at a cost share of $750, a meter fee of $272.50, for a total of just over $1,000. If it was a new home and the system development fee applied, that would raise it up to that $4,200 level. If you were to look at it from a maximum, you'd be looking at a maximum cost share of $3,000. With the meter cost included, you're up near $3,300. And then again, if the system development fee applies, it would raise up to just short of $6,500. So let's take a look at what we got the first year. So as I said, we had the application period open for about 90 days, and we conducted an extensive outreach effort using digital, radio, and print media. We also direct mailed around 2,100 brochures to residents of Union County. And applicants could apply either online or they could mail in a paper application, whatever worked best for them. And we strongly encouraged group applications. So out of this, we received 350 individual applicants, and that wound up coalescing into a total of 124 projects. So a very strong response from the community on this. So understanding that, staff took all this data in, and we had to create a map for each project to determine the estimated pipe length, the number of total estimated properties that could potentially connect to it, and ultimately determine that participation rate. So just a sample of what one of these might look like. And then we used a score sheet template just to tabulate the scores and develop the cost estimate for the project. You get a sample of what that might look like there. And this is what it all breaks down to. So as I said, 350 applicants, 124 projects. Total potential properties that could connect were almost 3,400. The average score was 22. So that's notable, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. But on a 100-point scale, obviously, there's room for improvement there. But the total footage of all the applicants or projects that we received was about 144 miles. The average footage per project was just over a mile. Estimated cost per applicant, just over $200,000. And our potential connections per mile wound up being 23. Overall, the participation rate was about 10%, and the total estimated cost for all of these projects was just over $72 million. Certainly.
The number that you used to come up with your total cost, I guess, per foot, were you using numbers relative to what we had been seeing by bidding out recent projects, or where did the number come from that you used to generate the estimate?
We used $95 a lineal foot, which is consistent with what we've been seeing on the shoreline backlog. So the backlog projects, the last couple of years that we've been undertaking, that's been the typical cost that we've seen.
Through a competitive bidding process?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now on there where it says the estimated cost per applicant,
Yes, so that's just the 350 applicants into the $72.3 million. So these are very high-level metrics.
but these were everyone that applied, and some of them would not be funded, but y'all just...
Certainly, this is just the total overall view. We'll break down the results a little bit further as we get in.
Okay.
So what we did was we also located all these on the map. As I said, we had to generate project maps for each one of these just as part of the analysis. So what you're seeing here is the existing system in blue, and where all the projects are shown in red. So you can see that those are pretty much all over the county. We've got them east, west, north, south. So again, indicative of a strong response from the community. So I wanted to look at how these broke down with respect to water quality. Looking at the total number of applicants that we had 350. Those that provided water quality data were, as you can see, we had 9 that submitted that had both a major and a minor contaminant, 16 with a major only, and then 9 with a minor only. So a total of 34 of the 350 applicants responded with water quality information, and only 2 responded with water quantity information. So we had a very low response rate as far as understanding what the health concern was for the individual applicant. So as you can see, that breaks down to about 10% and less than 1%. Common major contaminants, as you can see, lead, arsenic, coliform, petroleum products. The minor contaminants are manganese, iron, and a low well yield is considered to be less than 2 gallons per minute. But the thing to take away here is that we had a very low response rate for people providing water quality information, and that's part of the reason that average score that I noted on the other slide was 22, because you effectively eliminated 60% of the scoring from a large number of applications. So didn't want to let this go at the applicant level, so we looked at it at the project level as well, because we took all those applications and combined them into projects. So wanted to see what that looked like from this perspective, and as you can see, it's fairly similar. There's a expected uptick in the percentage of projects that would have water quality testing just because there's a smaller pool. But generally aligned with what we saw on the applicant basis. Looking at the economic factors, so again, data you've seen before, 350 applicants, 23 potential customers per mile, that high-level cost per applicant of $207,000, overall participation rate of about 10%, and applicants that did have a system benefit, about 1 in 3.
the only thing, go back to that one. The estimated cost per applicant, I think this is given out, it's misleading because the system, the projects that got approved on this,
This is the new program, sir.
Sir.
These are the new applications. This isn't the old backline. backlog. This is the stuff that you're gonna have to give us direction on new projects that have been applied for.
This is not the 5.9 million.
These are new projects, so you're gonna have to give us direction on which ones to approve. So these are not projects that have been built or approved.
I know that, but what I'm saying is the 207,000 per applicant is not the ones that we'll be voting on tonight.
Yes, sir, that is accurate, and I apologize. All they're trying to do is give you the big picture, and then they're going to come down to the smaller picture where they show you the highest scored projects and then recommended projects, and you will get that information. This is just trying to let you see what the scope of the entire application pool look like.
I know, but, I anticipate it passing tonight, and it's going to leave a thought in a voter's mind that we're approving a project that's $207,000 per tap.
So when we get to the item where you're going to vote, it'll have what the cost is, and it'll break down what it is per applicant, and it'll have that information. I understand what you're saying, but I think it is important that you see the macro as well as the micro.
It's just this part of it burns into the brain.
It's probably because it's first, and I understand that it is first, so you see that first.
We all realize that there are some lines in Union County that economically, unless the people pay for it, they can never be run. We all understand that.
Certainly.
And I just think.
It wasn't an attempt to mislead, it was just about giving you all the facts. We apologize if it's led to anything that's a misunderstanding.
Yeah, certainly do apologize. I tried to form this presentation like an hourglass, so big level, down to the detail, and then back out to what we're asking you for. So, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions. I'm happy to go into detail on them, but trust me, we will get to the details on the recommended projects, and the numbers are much better than this. So I did want to take a minute and address what we could look at as far as potential connections. We talked about how the number of properties that these extensions would go by, when you look at all the applications received, is nearly 3,400. So if you were to take all of those projects and look at it as every property connects to these extensions, this is kind of how it breaks down. So if you have a 100% connection rate, you're in that $20,000 range. As that connection rate drops off, obviously the cost increases. So our historical post-project connection rate is about 10%. So looking at that, this is what we could reasonably expect if you looked at the whole group. So you'd have a total of 655 connections, would wind up being about $110,000 per connection. But again, these aren't the recommended projects. This is the macro view. So now we're going to delve into the actual evaluation of the applicants, now that you've seen the kind of the high-level statistics. So this is where it plots out, and what you're seeing here are the blue dots are all the projects that we had, all 124 of them. The ones with the kind of purple shaded boxes around them, those are the ones that provided some sort of water quality information or water quantity information. So that's the 21 out of 124. And then that green horizontal line is the average score of 22. So what you're seeing is roughly a quarter of those projects fell above the average and about 3/4 of them fell below. So looking at the top 15 applicants, and Chairman, this is where we're starting to get into the details. So looking at the top scoring applicants, those top 15, you can see we have a total number of applicants of 106, roughly 444 properties that are potential for connection, project length of just over 19 miles, and that cost per applicant is half of what we were talking about at the macro level. And then breaking that down as a potential cost per customer, looking at it at 100% rate, you're hovering right around that $22,000 mark. And based on the historical rate, it would be about $70,000 per customer. The participation rate was about 1 in 4, and the average score was 47. Total project cost for those 15 projects is about $9.7 million. And then that column on the right is just our historical backlog, the last couple of years that we've been working on that short line backlog. So you can see they're not far off, not in direct alignment, but definitely not far off from each other.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you. So if you'll go back to that slide over there, the cost per potential connection, that would be what I was going to ask to see, and that was the cost of per parcel affected. And so that would be, if they're going down a mile-long road and there's 10 customers on that road, then the cost per customer might be $50,000, $60,000, a high number that would be prohibitive looking. But then when you take in that there's, 20 more parcels on that road, if anybody builds on that road, there's 20 parcels affected, or that could be affected. And if you have a field, a farm field with 30, 40 acres in it, you could just have potential that somebody, if they did develop that on acre lots, that you're going to have that many more customers. So that's a number, I think, meant to intimidate more than, and I think this number is better suited to how many cost per potential connections is there. And that number you can see at 21,000 or 16,000 is a lot more reasonable, and the customer's going to be paying part of that. And they're going to have connection fees, and any new homes are going to be paying a system development fee. So when it washes all out, it looks a lot better than it does just that shock number of 200,000 or whatever.
Mr. Chairman.
And Commissioner Helms.
You said you were using the $95, which is what historically, lately it's been running.
That is correct.
And the $95, you're actually running 0.8 of a mile less lines, but yet you almost doubled the price, between $50,000 and $91,000 per applicant. What's your logic behind that doubling when the cost per linear foot's the same?
Well, you've got the project length with it, which is 19.3 miles. So our total cost here for these top 15 is $9.7 million. And you've got 106 applicants. So that cost per applicant in that macro of the 15 applications is $91,400.
So your applicants in the
You're just taking that
21 was
9.7
higher.
million and dividing it by 106.
Okay, all right.
You've got almost 80 more applicants in the backlog. That's why.
Applicants are people that actually utilized.
Applicants in the backlog, you had almost 80. If you're looking at the 50 and the 91, it's applicants. And if you're looking at the number of properties, then it's 562 to 544, and that's where those numbers come from.
But what did we actually do in the
The
past?
applicants are the ones that are actually served.
Okay.
There could be people in the future who connect, but we can't guarantee the future.
I understand.
It's only those that actually officially connect.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So this one is a bit of an eyeful, so I'll apologize for the slide, but I felt it was important to get all the numbers and data in front of you. So these are the top 15 applications, and you can see just moving from left to right across the chart, our water quality scores range from 25 to 40, and keep in mind again that's out of 60. So again, you're seeing this reflection that we just didn't get the water quality information with the applicant in order to populate that score.
And John, I'm going to say something to that. And I brought this up with the manager. There were people that were waiting on their water reports that came after the cutoff date, but they had filed their application. And they were told because the period had ended, they couldn't bring in any more information. And I know that's just a breakdown in communication, but when I hear something like that from a citizen, it just doesn't bode well.
Well, I am aware that we had some full applications come in after the closing date of December 14th.
But I'm talking about people that had their application in. And on this particular road, it was one that was made the cut. it was Tom Green, Tom Starnes. But to tell them that they can't bring in their water report, there's supply chain problems everywhere, and it's also at the testing labs too.
Certainly. And you brought that to my attention, Chairman, and we understand this is lessons learned. There's some things that we learned about it. There actually has to be a point at which we cannot accept additional information because we have to start scoring, and we can't treat people, we can't give certain individuals more latitude than others. So there is a point, but I agree with you. I think we can establish a time frame at which additional information can be submitted so that we can evaluate those applications fairly. And I hear what you're saying. We learned a lot of lessons in this first round, so you're absolutely right.
And it's incredible what y'all have put together. I mean, you know, we saw the first cost and we didn't like it. You've come back, we liked it. And I know it's a learning process. It's just, as Commissioner Williams said, when we talk to these people, we're their communication.
Sure.
And I never say, call John Shutak and fuss at him. I try to explain it to them.
Right.
And so when I hear a legitimate concern, I bring it to you.
Absolutely. And
And
we
I
think that's a
know
legitimate concern. It is.
We are inventing the wheel when it comes to rural water here, and I imagine, I'm very proud of the system. And I'm not fussing, I'm just saying, we're the tip of the spear. Commissioner Rushing.
Just for example, there's one project on here that's $817,950 project cost. Cost per applicant $35,564. If you divide that amongst the 70 potential properties, you're looking at $11,635.
You've got the information. It's right there. It says cost for potential connection.
Yeah.
It has that as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see.
Where it says 100%.
Well, it says 17.
Where it's 100%, it comes up to 17.
Okay, so that's if we paid the whole thing and they didn't pay.
That's if every project connected. That's what that means.
Okay, I'm coming up.
If every potential property connected, then that should be the number that would be 100% of connections.
And then we have them as a water customer too.
That's
for
correct. Yes,
50
sir.
years. What's
Absolutely.
the average age?
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
And so, again, that money does pay back over time and could.
Certainly.
It's just a thing where if we're going to, we've said to people year after year for 30 years that our goal is to get water to people. And the cost keeps going up. It's never going to probably not go up, I guess. But of course, if we hit a recession, maybe everything will go down 40% or something. But
Yes, sir.
But again, these costs don't scare me that much because we're getting potential customers. There's cable companies, there's electric companies, there's solar power companies that they're looking at customers too, and they don't, your potential customers here. We had cable, we had internet cable run down our road. I'm sure they figure it all out, but we're in rural Union County. I'm not thrown off by the cost. And I hope that that's not what the goal in this is.
And we're not, and I want you to understand that that's, again, it's in the spirit of you having information. First off, we can't guarantee you that 100% of people are going to connect to water. In fact, they won't. We will not get 100%.
Can we fast forward to the good news?
This is good news.
I'm talking about the ones that's on the 5.9 million on the approved list.
Sure. We can go right to that if that's what you'd like to see. Is that the 5.9?
That's not it.
Nope. Recommended projects.
That's
We can fast
it.
forward to that if that's what you want to see.
That's it right there.
I'm going to let John talk about the fast of that part.
All right.
These people don't care about the micro, the macro. They say, when am I getting water? And I've explained and Commissioner Rushing has too, and Commissioner Simpson, Helms, Williams. Everything's gotta work out. And then I tell them, if we vote on it tonight and you're approved, it's gonna be 12 to 24 months. They've waited 40 years. They can wait 2 more, they tell me. So give us the good news.
That is good to hear. So, again, just looking through what the recommended projects are, there's a total of 8 applicants at 92, total number of properties, so those potential connections at 291, total project length of about 12 miles. The cost per applicant, and again, this is just the applicants, is about $64,000. The cost per potential connection, so if everybody connected, that'd be in that $20,000 range. And then, based on our historical average, that potential cost would be about $52,000.
Mr. Chairman, please. Just one clarification. So this cost per potential connections is the number of houses that are actually there today?
Properties.
So if you go buy a 100-acre field, how do you not say there's 100 potential connections there?
Honestly, you can't make a guarantee that that's ever going to be.
They count it as one.
You count it as one, but it could be a 10-acre parcel is counted as one, not 10.
Yes, sir.
Or 5.
It's only based on.
So these potential connections could even be
Right.
lower over
If
time.
it's divided as a subdivision, it could be, absolutely. Based
Thank
on
you.
current conditions.
And one other concern, when we were told how much the COVID money could cover, we were told that basically that estimate went up by 600% from 2018 or 19. But these kind of stay around 50. This has gone up from 50,000 to maybe 64,000. What's the difference there?
We're using the same metric, $95 a linear foot, which is what we have seen for the last backlog projects.
Okay.
That's why. Now, understand, this isn't bid. These are using past numbers. So when we actually go to bid this, it might be $115 a linear foot. We don't know what that future cost is going to be. We're using what we have done the most recent projects on, which is $95 a linear foot.
Thank you.
So on this slide, I'd also like to point out that 7 of the 8 projects, we're addressing those health hazard concerns. So 7 out of 8, we're addressing a major contaminant. 7 out of 8, we're addressing a minor contaminant. 1 out of 8, we're addressing a quantity issue. And then 6 out of 8 are more than one applicant. So encouraging that group participation. Total estimated costs, as you can see, $5.9 million. And this is where they fall. So you can see they're fairly well divided. We've got roughly 5 on the east and 3 on the west. And again, just tabulated information here. You can see the overall scores range between 41 and 66. Again, our number of applicants range anywhere from a single applicant up to 23. Those potential properties, it can be just one property or up to 110. You're seeing project costs range from about $30,000 up to just about $1.7 million. Cumulative cost of 5.9, and then the cost per applicant and the future or potential costs are shown in the last 3 columns there. And you can see, the higher the post-project connection rate, obviously the more reasonable that number becomes. So I'll stop there briefly if there's any questions.
Yes, sir.
This project that's 1/10 of a mile.
Yes, sir.
It's gonna cost $59,850. Is that down a road and only one house on the road because there's one potential property and there's one house and you're gonna go 1/10 of a mile? Why can they not just, is it, explain give me an idea of what that property is. Is that a farmhouse in the middle of a field or what is that?
Well, you're correct in your assessment. It's a single point of connection.
Right.
As to the exact configuration, honestly, I could not tell you what each of one of these looks like. But
Okay,
it's
so
a
like-
single applicant.
We
It's one
set up a
extension,
scoring
and it's an
system.
entire property.
I went through, they sent, Brian, did you send that to all?
I thought I did, and if I did not, I thought I sent it to all.
Did you
Yeah,
get it?
but I guess what I'm getting at is like, if that's one property owner and only one property affected, I'm envisioning a farmer in the middle of a field and on John Doe Road, which his house is at the end of John Doe Road, and he's the only one who lives on it. Can he not just put a meter at the main line and go from there?
In these instances, the answer to that would be no.
Is there a policy that needs to be changed to fix a $59,850 problem?
Not that I am aware of.
Because I just,
Well, let me say this, Commissioner Rushing. If I remember correctly, this one that scored 66 is Forest Hills High School Road, I believe. It scored the highest by 10 points over everything else. And he, as Brian said, he told me the applications were, some of them were inadequate. And this particular person checked all the boxes and done all their homework.
Sure.
And-
Well, this is exactly the example that I think that some of the board members ask about, you know. How can someone get water to their property? Whether it's a tenth of a mile or whether it's a mile, it's about what can you do, what can we do to help them get water to their property? Where this particular application scored well because it was one property, it was one applicant, it was a short distance, it may have had a higher cost, and that may be because of some of the engineering issues that you have to deal with to get to it. But regardless, I thought that was what we were looking for,
It
was
is.
opportunities to serve properties. Now, I want to point out something that wasn't really made clear in the beginning, and that is, during this application process, and we learned this, is we really didn't have a good understanding from our applicants that they would do much better if they pooled their applications. We only had a few that actually pooled their applications together and did one application with a lot of applicants. So our staff actually went through and actually put together applicants and said, well, this needs to go with this one and this needs to go. They did their work for them. But I want to point out that it was the intention of this board that our citizens were supposed to do that work. Go talk to your neighbors, get them interested in this project so that they score
It's one
well.
potential property.
So I'm sorry, say that
This
again.
guy's got no neighbors looking at the
And he didn't, and so that's fine, but there are a number on here where the staff actually whittled those down and said, these work better together. This is how this would work as a project, which is why there are 124 projects versus 350 projects, because they took the applications and put them together.
Feet in a mile, Jerry, feet in a mile. How many feet in a mile? 5?
They're 5,280 feet in a mile.
5,000, okay, so he's got 520 feet. Now, I've always heard that if you're less than 1,000 feet from a water line, we'll extend the water line.
Well, again, that program doesn't exist anymore. Remember, the board replaced all programs with this program.
Okay, so that no longer exists.
That's correct.
So before, we would have paid the 31,000, whatever.
Well, that was the $600,000 a year.
Yeah.
One
That's correct.
project, as Commissioner Helms called the Coles deal, whoever showed
So
up.
this 520 feet, God, I'm going to ask, out of respect for my fellow board members, when we come in Wednesday to talk, please be ready to discuss this after that, maybe a little bit, because.
And that's where the workshop, the Public Works workshop would be places to talk about things that you brought up earlier.
We have a meeting. If he has questions, we can certainly answer his questions when we have a meeting earlier. Absolutely.
If he owns that whole property and nobody else is going to benefit from it, why can he not put a meter and go to his house from whatever distance?
Well, so there are some limitations for how far you can run a lateral or a service line in order to serve a piece of property.
But if you got to run is he required to run 8-inch pipe?
I'll be honest with you, I couldn't say the specifics on it. And we do actually
minimize these issues, because what we run into is what property owners want to do is they want to run a service line, and then later they want to say, well, I want to subdivide my property, and I want that service line to serve multiple lots.
Well, you
We
say
don't
only
do
one
that.
potential customer.
We don't do that.
You're saying only one potential
That's
customer.
correct, but that doesn't stop them from saying, I want to subdivide my property, and I want those service lines to now become lines.
And all the commissioners need to know, if you don't know, you're required by state law, if there's an existing home there, they're not required to change off the well.
That's
But
correct.
if you subdivide the property or you do anything else, then you're required to tap onto the system, if water is
To the
available.
public water line, yes, sir, to public water.
Right.
That's correct.
Mr.
But
Chairman.
we'll be happy to answer your questions, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like when we get together Wednesday, I guess it is, that we're having that meeting.
Sure.
You got, your first item's a 1/10 of a mile, and on down, there's another 1/10 of a mile. Both of them have one potential properties. But the cumulative cost on one is $3,363,000, and the other one is $31,000.
No,
It's-
it's starting
That's
at
the
the top.
cumulative amount.
Yeah,
every-
that's,
every-
that if you
they
add
the
everything,
next
that
amount.
would be.
That's what
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you look at project
Yeah,
cost, that's the actual cost of
Okay.
estimated cost.
But there is funny that it's 59,000 for one and 31,000 for the other, and it's both a 1/10 of a mile.
That is the beauty of rounding. These are from footages, so if you get something, we're not going to carry a decimal place out
got
to, two
All
or
right.
three places for miles.
Let me cut to the chase. This is y'all's recommendation. You need an action, right?
Yes, we're looking for the board to
All right,
authorize
I'm gonna make a
these.
motion to approve the FY '22 short line extension in the amount of $5,901,400
As presented to the
as
board.
presented to the board. Any comments? Which is, this is our $5 million budgeted per year, plus our leftover money from previous budgets.
Yes, sir. That's the savings we've been able to accumulate so far.
Okay, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My maternal grandfather used to say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I'm going to support this. I think that, we had a public meeting where we came up with a scoring system for these short line projects, and I think it's an important to try to follow that and instill confidence in the program and incent people to want to participate in it. I think overall, these appear to be some good projects, and I'm going to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay, tell your ladies that people will be calling tomorrow, and guys,
All
and
right,
saying,
and-
did I make it?
I just want to point out that there's we've got some timing for you. So one of the things that folks are going to need to be aware of is if when their cost share, we are going to have to set a time frame for that cost share to be due. Right now, we're saying May of 2022. Okay, if the board has questions and concerns about that, let us know. Because obviously, as part of this, we don't want to put in place design and permitting if someone backs out later because they haven't paid anything.
Right.
So it really is the deadline of you have to pay in order to move forward with that project. Right now, this is what's proposed, and again, estimated construction permitted 12 to 24 months. Really just depends on how fast we can get design and permitting done.
Isn't that what you call getting in the weeds, and we're supposed to stay out of the weeds?
I heard from you that you had questions and concerns from your citizens. That's why I brought up this fee
Well,
due
it's a
date,
very-
because
but
I
I'm
wanted
gonna-
you to be aware of it.
I'm gonna let y'all handle that.
All right,
Do you
yes,
need
sir.
a action, do you need a vote, or just?
Nope, just making
This-
sure you're aware of it.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, let's move on to 22-022, Poplar Road Pump Station, interim improvements. John?
Yes, sir. All right, so in this one, I'll be talking about the Poplar Road Pump Station, the interim improvements. Just going to run through a project overview, kind of where the project's been, where we are today, Brief overview of the project budget and then the requested action for the board. So, overall, the Poplin Road Pump Station project, as you know, is a series of interim improvements to the existing pump station. It includes an equalization tank, transfer pumps, piping conveyance to bring it from the existing station to that EQ facility, and then all the related mechanical, electrical, and control system improvements. This project is being delivered via progressive design build, so early engagement of a contractor, and overall project budget of $15.8 million. You can see here the Poplin Road Pump Station off on the right of the graphic there. The red line is the conveyance corridor that those pumps push flow through into the East Fork Interceptor, which ultimately leads to the 12 Mile Creek plant. The dashed red line you see there is the West Fork Interceptor project, which is presently under construction. So where have we been with this project? Well, we elected to move forward with progressive design build. You guys authorized that for us in February of 2020. We advertised an RFQ, our request for qualifications, for a design build team in November of 2020. And we selected the Garney and GHD team based on their written response and the following interview series. We worked through the Phase 1 or design contract with them, which was authorized in April of 2021 and then formally executed the next month. And we received the guaranteed price proposal from that team in January of this year. So we were able to advance the design very rapidly, and we're now ready to move forward with the construction phase of the project. And that brings me to where we are today. The design has been advanced to about that 60% level, which is what you typically advance design to before receiving that guaranteed maximum price or guaranteed price from the design build team. Permitting through NCDEQ, the Corps of Engineers, as well as the Town of Indian Trail has been completed. And the only outstanding permits that we have to get are going to be acquired as part of the construction phase, and that includes the DOT driveway permit, as well as the Union County building and electrical permits. We've negotiated the final terms and price with the design builder, and that contract amendment is ready for your approval. As part of that, we do have a program manager engaged, and that's Brown and Caldwell, and we have worked with them to negotiate the scope and fee for their services for the construction portion of the project as well. Sorry about that. So just a quick look at the overall program budget. The capital program envisioned a project budget of $15.8 million, broken down as you see here. $1.1 million in program management costs, $1.5 million for the initial design effort, and then $12.9 million for the actual construction, as well as about a $300,000 allocation for property acquisition. Where we are today, as you can see, we have program management costs that are approximately $1.6 million. The Phase 1 design contract with the Garney GHD team was just short of $2 million. And the Phase 2 construction contract we've negotiated with the Garney GHD team is at $13.4 million. Land legal and permitting costs have held consistent with the planned budget, so we're at $300,000 expended there. So you can see that we're roughly $1.5 million above the projected budget, and that's over the last roughly year and a half. So looking at that percentage-wise, overall the program's just under 10% above what was planned, really, which is not really to be unexpected given where we are in today's economy. So the requested actions by the board are to accept the lump sum price proposal from Garney Companies in the amount of roughly $13.4 million, accept the scope of services with Brown and Caldwell for those construction phase services, as I mentioned, bringing their contract amount up to $933,000, and then adopt the Capital Project Ordinance 296 to allocate the additional funding to complete the project.
Any questions, Commissioner Rush?
What's the cost per customer for those upgrades, upfits?
That's not a statistic for this particular project that I have available to me.
So if we do 2 million gallons a day out of that pump station, right?
Currently, yes.
Okay, and at 280 gallons per day per house, that equals out to roughly 7,000, close to 7,000, approximately 7,000 homes, and that's a fixed number. There's no more potential customers after that. So that's about $2,000 to $3,000 on just this upfits per customer. Does that sound right?
Sir, again, I don't know the total number of customers in the Poplin service area.
You know, when
or
we're
the
giving that
breakdown
on the
of what
water
this would
side,
mean.
I'd appreciate in the future that we're giving that on the sewer side. What is the cost of the sewer plant? What is the cost of the sewer upgrade, the upfit per customer, potential customer? And there's a number there. There's a finite number. I mean, it's not like there's not going to be potential more customers. I mean, that 2 million gallons is set. And the only thing that can improve that is improvements in water usage, so making sure the toilets don't run or whatever to get that 280. And it is 280 gallons per house, right, Brian?
I believe that's what we use.
That's the number we use, 280 gallons per house.
For
Commissioner
purposes
Rushing.
with the-
Thank you.
yes.
I just appreciate that in the future too, since we're doing it on water. Maybe do that on the sewer side too.
But this is an EQ tank that allows us not to have spills, to be able to equalize.
Yeah. Is that the EQ tank? There's no upfits. This is the EQ tank cost. So that's just, that's not even.
Just the EQ tank.
So that's how many gallons a day?
The EQ tank is just over 4 million gallons of storage.
It's not adding capacity.
No, sir.
Right, so it's still an upfit to fix issues on a 7,000, roughly 7,000 customer.
I mean,
Yeah,
I think we need,
It's not increasing capacity, allows for you to send
right.
capacity.
It's just a preventative. It's like fixing the heat inflow, and it's fixing the problem, fixing issues.
It is, yes, sir.
Yeah, but it's still a cost per customer. And I'd appreciate that, to see that in future presentations. And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, that's not I mean, we get it on one side, I'd like to see it on the other. It's not I mean, $2,000 or $3,000 is not huge, because we'll make that back from the sewer customers, but it is a cost. Thank you.
okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What accounts for the 45% increase in program management costs?
I'm glad you asked. So the program management costs and the Phase 1 design costs, yes, we spent more money there. What you'll notice is, while those costs went up, the overall estimated construction cost only rose by 3.9%. So we invested more fleshing out all those details so we could get a better price from our contractor. It's also, that's not the only thing, but with respect to program management, the scope of those services and what that entails is really driven as you flesh out the project moving forward in this first design phase. So the scope was more firmed up and allowing us to define what that cost was going to be.
How about the 33% increase in the design work expenses?
Again, we made our best estimate of what those costs would be. I can tell you that it's money well spent because we have a quality design that takes advantage of a number of things. So again, we were able to hold that cost down on the construction end.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve this. I need to read.
Sorry.
I need to make a motion to accept the lump sum price proposal of Garney Companies Incorporated in the amount of $13,365,201. Accept the scope of services as shown in the attached amendment with Brown and Caldwell, increasing the contract amount to $933,317, and adopt capital project ordinance 296. Got a motion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
Passed. Okay. 22-032, preliminary assessment of Charlotte water capacity.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm batting cleanup today for all the Union County water stuff. And so this is the last water item on the agenda today. And so what I'm going to take you through is a study that we are doing in a partnership with Charlotte Water. And this is something that you asked for. Staff was directed to study options for how can we increase flow from Union County, from our sewer system to the McAlpine wastewater treatment facility in the Charlotte Water sewer area. We've discussed this with sort of the leadership there, my counterpart at Charlotte Water, and they're not opposed to the idea of taking more flow. Pretty much their response back to us was, we're not opposed to it. We don't know how much additional flow we can take because we've never really studied the system in this part of the county with the idea of accepting more flow from from Union County. So we agreed, since it is ultimately for our benefit, that we would fund a study to really look, we call it a capacity assessment, to really understand, one, can the McAlpine facility handle more flow? Can they treat it, one? And two, can the pipes that connect Union County to Charlotte Water, how much flow can they accept? And so, if there are constrictions in the pipeline, what improvements are necessary to maximize or optimize the flow to the treatment facility? And so I wanted to show you this map. So this actually shows you both Mecklenburg County and Union County and sort of the relationship between the two sewer systems. This is way north in the county, but up here, you may have heard about it, you may not have, but Charlotte Water is actually building a brand new wastewater treatment facility. And so this Stowe water reclamation facility will take flow from these two basins. And these two basins, the Paw Creek and Long Creek basins, actually send flow to McAlpine. So they'll be able to divert to this new facility, freeing up capacity at McAlpine for other purposes, because they expect to see growth within the McAlpine sewer basin. And again, that frees up capacity for us. So the issue for us isn't really the treatment capacity, it's the pipe. And so you can see here, there are really three sections of pipe. There is the gravity section for Charlotte Water. There is the 6-mile force main, and then there's the 12-mile force main. And so what we are studying isn't just, can they accept more flow from the 6-mile basin? It's, can they accept more flow for this entire stretch? So this is a better graphic, and it's more detailed, from 12-mile to the 6-mile Creek pump station, and then ultimately to the McAlpine wastewater treatment plant. And so Brown and Caldwell, the engineering firm that we've tasked with this, because again, it sort of fit in with the whole master planning work that they're already doing, is going to look at this for us. And they're going to do the capacity assessment, really looking at the pipe to see how much flow, where are there constrictions, what improvements need to be made in order for Union County Water to be able to maximize the flow volume that it sends to Charlotte Water. And so the board agenda item that's presented before you today really supports the direction of the board by authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute an agreement consistent with this agenda item. And it would be with Brown and Caldwell, the engineering firm that's currently working on our master plan. And the contract sum would be for $84,552, and that would be within the adopted FY22 budget for Union County Water.
Okay, before I make a motion, I just want to warn our board members that by doing this study, and we were all in favor of let's get the system where we can send some overflow to Charlotte Water, that if this study indicates there's some bottlenecks with Charlotte Water receiving more flow, they're probably going to say, well, are y'all going to pay for it? Because, so I just want to, as one commissioner's good at looking around the corner, we're spending money to make sure that they can take more from us, but this may uncover some problems that we would be burdened with taking, but I'm prepared to make that journey. I just want us all to realize that. Okay, I make a motion to approve item 22-032, which authorizes the manager to negotiate and execute an agreement consistent with this agenda item with Brown and Caldwell. All in favor? Okay.
How long have we been working on repairs and upfitting that pump station in that area? Because it seems like it's been there since 2006, maybe, or how long is that how long have we been pumping water from that pump?
John, do you know?
Are you talking about the 6 Mile Creek pump station?
Yeah, the one from 12 Mile to over to 6 Mile.
Tarkill.
Yeah, because we were talking about Tarkill back in 2014.
Well, if you're talking about the Tarkill force main, we're currently working on that, and I believe if I'm right, we ran into some issues this week, but we are finishing it up in the next week or two in terms of just the final work on it. So that'll be back in service shortly.
So is that the line we're talking about?
No, we're talking about the force main from the 6 Mile Creek pump station over to the gravity sewer within the Charlotte water system. The Tarkill, I think.
This is a study to make sure that Charlotte Water can take, if we want to send more, they have said, as you said earlier, they said we don't have either preference. We just don't know how much more we can take. So they have asked us, we've got to do the study.
We have to pay for it.
Pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's no benefit to
So-
Charlotte Water.
This line, which
Yes, sir.
we've had for a decade or more, am I right or wrong?
The
The Tarkill has been in place for at least a decade.
Let's make sure everybody understands
Yeah.
what we're talking about. This purple line is
Right.
what we have had in place.
And
okay?
so
This line here is Charlotte's line. Yeah, and it's been there for however long it's been there.
Okay.
We're not talking about doing any study of this line, really. We're really talking about their system on their side.
So we have been able to move an amount of sewage through that line for over a decade.
However long, yes, sir.
How much?
But we've not moved that much. We've only used it for overflow from 12 Mile.
And we've never really
And-
evaluated how much we could send into Charlotte because we had a minimum contract and we only sent roughly, I think at any given time, about 1 million gallons.
Okay, so what my understanding of this is that's all it's good for, is to send that, and and if we have an emergency at the plant, this is an emergency plan, right?
That's correct.
Are we looking for additional capacity?
So this serves two purposes. It actually could have additional capacity in the 6 Mile Creek Basin because we obviously still pump within the 6 Mile Creek Basin or flow into the 6 Mile Creek Basin to McAlpine Creek. So it serves both purposes.
So how much are we asking for? How much additional? 1 million
You have to-
gallons?
you have to
Half a
study
million
first.
gallons?
That's the purpose of this study.
Okay.
'Cause, the study will tell you what the capacity of the existing system is.
Right.
And if you want more, it will tell you what improvements you need to make to the pipe in order to maximize your flow. So if we wanted, say, 5 million gallons a day, system couldn't handle it. But if that's what we wanted, they will tell you, here are the system improvements you need to make. You need to upsize this pipe, add this pump, et cetera. So what they are going to do, what Brown and Caldwell is doing, is actually studying the capacity of the existing infrastructure, how much flow it can handle. And then if we wanted to send more, what improvements we would need to make to this line in
For the red line.
order to send more flow to Charlotte Water.
So the purple line, which is ours, how much can we send through there ourselves today? If, just the purple line.
Just the purple. Well, the purple line it's a diversionary line. We don't use it on a regular basis. But if you're asking me, how much can we send through on a regular basis, it's a 12-inch line?
It's a 16-inch
16.
line. If you were to max out the capacity of a 16-inch line, it'd be 4 to 5 MGD per day.
Come to the podium, John.
So that's, the force main, the purple line there is a 16-inch force main, and if you were to max out the capacity of it, it would be somewhere between 4 and 5 MGD.
Okay, so we're going to ask and do a study to ask Mecklenburg County what it would take to upfit that red piece of this puzzle to do 5 million gallons a day?
It is not just the red, it's the red and the green. to
Okay, the
plant.
red and the green. We're going to ask them, see how much, if they can take 5 million gallons per day, or 6 million.
Or whatever it is that the board wants us to
Whoa,
study.
wait a minute. We're not asking them if they can take 5 million. They're requiring us to do a study that their system can take an additional 5 million. And you must realize that on Charlotte Water, they have had growth in that area, so the capacity's been getting used up on that red and green line in Mecklenburg County. And they're saying they can treat it if they can handle the flow.
So 12 Mile Creek plant today is about 6 million gallons.
7.5 million gallon.
It's at
treatment
6
plant.
million gallons actual usage on average per day right now. We're looking at.
Yes.
Okay, because we get in discussions about this amongst ourselves about the lack of sewer capacity. So we're talking about potential of another 6 million, 5 million gallons of sewage, and it may only cost us
It will actually,
pennies on the dollar compared to building a new plant. So that's what I'm trying to figure.
That's not, okay, you're misconstruing what we're talking about here. So this isn't about asking for the 12 Mile Creek plant to gain 5 or 6 million gallons of capacity. That's not what this is about.
No.
That's not what this is
No,
about.
the water runs to the 12 Mile Creek plant where there's a pump that can pump it to 6 Mile Creek
For emergency purposes.
for emergency purposes. Do we need 6 million gallons a day of emergency sewer?
No, and we're not asking that question.
Okay.
The board asked, the board asked us to evaluate, could Charlotte accept additional flow? That is what we're exploring here.
Okay.
We are taking what you ask us to do and find out, could they accept additional flow? Now, 6 Mile Creek has its own flow. It flows into the McAlpine Creek. It gets pumped and goes through their system. And we're what, 3 million gallons, I believe, is what our contract is. Now, if we want to have additional flow in 6 Mile Creek, we need to be able to know how much we could send from 6 Mile Creek to McAlpine Creek, and will Charlotte accept that? And then if we want to divert more than 1 million gallons, or whatever we're diverting right now for emergency purposes, we need to know that as well. We're not asking to add more capacity of 12 Mile. This is really understanding what could we send to McAlpine Creek that Charlotte would be willing to accept, and what would it take for us, because they're going to ask us to do it, to fix whatever their constraints are. That's what this is about.
So if the upfit on this pipe were $10 million,
Then the board has to make a decision, are you interested?
that's right. But going from, going 1.5 million gallons per day in 12 Mile Creek is going to cost us $28, $30, $40 million. So what I'm trying to figure out is that if we can get additional 1.5 for 10 million instead of, I ain't got no problem with the study to come back and tell us what it's going to cost or what it's going to cost. I'd like to hear it because there's a potential of money savings here is what I'm hearing. So,
And I think what you're doing is you're trying to treat the 6 Mile Creek Basin and 12 Mile Creek Basin the same. They're not the same.
Right.
They're not the same drainage areas.
but the pump is located at the 12 Mile Creek plant.
That is the
nearby.
pump for the diversion only. This pump here is Charlotte's pump, which actually flows it to their gravity system, which goes to the McAlpine Creek plant.
Right.
That pump that's at 12 Mile is merely the emergency diversion pump.
Right.
It is not intended to give you additional capacity for 12 Mile Creek.
Right, and let me say something there, Brian, to bring him, remind him. You told us a year ago that once we got all this in place, it didn't automatically increase the capacity of 12 Mile.
It does not.
We had to go to the state and ask them.
Right.
Once we get and now we're finding out all the details of this, And if we can do 5 million gallons a day to Charlotte Water, we would first have to ask the state before we could start turning permits loose.
Right.
And we also know that Charlotte Water charges us a lot more than what we can treat it for at 12 Mile.
Certainly.
So we might save money by sending it 12 Mile, but we're going to pay for the expansion
You'll
at,
save on the capital costs, but your
Well,
operating costs are going to be very high.
but we'll eventually send it, our expansion at 12 Mile, we'll pay for it by sending it to a higher processing place at 6 Mile.
It's however you want to look at it. There's absolutely an additional operation cost. And I also want to point out that as you expand your 12 Mile Creek plant, the ability to have additional diversion is important.
Right.
So right now, at 7.5 million gallons, the diversion amount might be appropriate. But as we get closer to a larger number, whether that's 9 or 12 or whatever number you go to at some point in the future, having the ability to divert more is better for the plant in the emergency situations. Not for capacity, but in emergency situations.
But if, the 2 million or 3 million going over there now, we can only use for emergency. We can't license any of that to builders.
No, the 3 million is the contract for the 6 Mile basin.
Right.
We flow from 12 Mile to 6 Mile, so that just counts as part of that 3 million
Right.
contract.
I know what I'm saying, and if we go to 5 million, that don't mean we can issue more permits. We've got to ask the state. Commissioner Higgins.
Yeah, I agree. Your operational costs go up. What concerns me is that operational cost to add capacity in 6 Mile
Certainly.
cost every citizen that's on our system.
Yes, sir.
So therefore, I'm a new customer. I'm gonna have to pay more so you can add capacity in that. Just have to realize that, there's thousands of others gonna see a rate increase to facilitate adding a couple million gallons. So it's not pennies on the dollar that it's gonna save us. There's a lot of costs associated, and it's gonna hit the customers.
Yeah, we don't know what the capital costs are. And I think that's part of the.
I'm not talking about the capital, I'm talking about their processing fee. Their processing
certainly.
fee is what, the highest of any processing we do?
It would
And
be-
so
yeah.
that is added into your operational
It is.
cost, and it's
Yes,
gonna be spread out to everybody from Indian Trail, Marvin, everywhere, to facilitate adding 1 million gallons to that. The
Certainly.
emergency thing is a different issue.
Certainly.
That's, and I'll support this study to know what our emergency capabilities are. But if you come back to us, I want to know what that extra capacity, the 5 million's been thrown around, what's it going to cost the average citizen?
Okay. I think we can come up with that.
Okay.
We've got a motion. Let's take a vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Whew. Okay. (22-030). Dennis Joyner, you see why we make the big bucks now. We work late.
Do you want Dennis to come now before we do ARPA?
Let's do the ARPA and then we'll,
I'm happy to let him come in advance. But I will go through this as quickly as possible. Chairman Wright and Commissioners, this is our ARPA, first run of our ARPA recommendations. I have spoken to all of you about these and will be happy to answer any questions. The first few slides really just give some background and some of the funding details that I won't spend a lot of time on tonight. We have finally received the final ruling from the U.S. Treasury, so we now are more comfortable with all of the rules that surround the funds, and we have submitted our first quarterly project and expenditure report last week, so that has taken place. There's still a little bit of uncertainty in terms of all the additional dollars that are available, and also in terms of the state budget that was passed that had ARPA dollars in it, that we are the expected recipient of some of those funds. And so we are still continuing to receive information and direction on how those dollars can and should be used and the requirements for those dollars. Just to give you, again, a reminder, these are the allocations that the board approved, and the buckets that, as I call them, the 5 buckets that were approved with the dollar amounts and the percentages. And another reminder is that we have to have these dollars allocated by December of 2024 and spent by December of 2026. So tonight, you're getting recommendations in 3 of those buckets. The first one is in the COVID-19 mitigation bucket. And first, there is the extension of non-county funded support for COVID-19 response staff, 9 positions in public health. This is slightly more than $2 million over that lifespan that I just mentioned. These are positions that were approved using state dollars during the COVID pandemic. And so this really aligns with the recommendation of the community team that I had put together to make some recommendations. And one of theirs was to continue the funding with ARPA funds to keep these staff positions moving through the life of that grant. Additionally, for these positions, the costs that we have allocated here are fully loaded, it's salary and benefits, but it's with a phased approach of gradually moving them off of this funding to either a recommendation for county dollars, which the board would see at budget recommendation time, or seeking other grant funds if available, or dropping them in their entirety if that was the decision that was made. The second recommendation here is for 4 additional detention officers, slightly more than $1.2 million. This is really to assist the sheriff in his operations, some of the experiences that they have had with COVID affecting their own staff, and also just the processes that they have to use for how they operate the jail, and he is here tonight if you have any questions. The next item is also from the Sheriff's Office, a whole body security scanning piece of equipment for arrestees as they come into the jail for $159,000. And then the last item is a smaller item, $10,500, which is for our Human Resources Department. As you're all aware, we had been looking at what the potential exposure was for us if the OSHA rule regarding vaccination status and testing went into effect, and that staff had been using some software that had a monthly fee to be up to speed if we needed to do that. We're not using that anymore, but this is the cost that they incurred for that software. The next group is community and economic support, that we are recommending $1.5 million for the Southwest Regional Library Project. And the second item is a little more than $40,000 for a public records request management system. And then last, we have 3 positions for administration costs, and the same follows for how the position costs are calculated. This is a local disaster recovery manager, a grants accountant, and a procurement specialist. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember around the year 2000 in that area, there was grants done, and a lot of local police departments took advantage of them to put cops on the street. And what happened was after that grant was gone, then these towns and they had to come up with the money themselves or start laying off police officers. So, we're looking at basically a penny, over a penny, on these just on positions that could have an effect on the tax rate once these funds go away. So you're saying that there is the opportunity there that these positions, if not needed at that time, could be eliminated?
Yeah, we will assess these just like we would any request for positions when they come to making a budget request. We did build this with giving us some cushion that we didn't want to have that 100% reliability through the life of that, because we knew that was going to be important.
Yeah, so even as what you're talking about there, that's a per year cost or over the?
This is the entire life through
Entire
2026.
Life. So it's not a penny on the tax rate then, if it's not, like, when you say $3 million worth of, or 3.5 million worth of employees, that's over the life.
Correct, not annually,
right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. You need a motion, don't you?
Yes, sir.
I need something in front of me.
I think it's just
I
to
want to make a
approve the
motion to
recommendations.
approve the ARPA funding recommendations as presented by staff. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, Mr. Joyner. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome, Commissioner Rape and fellow commissioners. The item that you have is it's some continuation funding from, and we receive agreement addenda funding from the state. Oftentimes that may be pass-through dollars from the feds. We've received a good bit of that over the past couple of years as it relates to COVID. These funds are for vaccination focused efforts. In this particular agreement addenda, it's for $335,000, and it would be used to support our efforts for vaccination in the community. This is not for mandating or requiring vaccinations. This is to have the capacity to continue to provide vaccinations in the community for those people who seek and want those vaccinations. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And the truth of the matter, most of the people that would get these vaccinations, if we didn't accept this money, we would probably find it somewhere else in the Health and Human Services budget.
That's true.
Yes, sir, Mr. Rushing.
Okay, so the mandates on this, the requirements on this from the federal government, what are those requirements? Are they that we just promote this, that we put it on our website? What are we supposed to do to implement the vaccination program?
Basically, it's to make the public aware the vaccine is available. It's to also assist with vaccine management, handling of it. You know, when vaccine comes in, we have to manage that. It can also be used for, actually, if we wanted to hold a vaccination clinic, we have done some of those in conjunction with churches or other folks that have interest in vaccinations occurring in the community. We have tried to make it available in particular to some communities that may not have access, and they seek to want our assistance in getting vaccinations in the community. I will point out, this is, the whole goal here is to be a partnership with the players in the community. It's not to require it, but these funds are used to support those particular efforts.
Are we required to mandate that our employees get it? Or any other kind of, that it's offered in schools, that anything that, no requirements, no strings attached?
No, we certainly encourage vaccinations based on the information that we have, just like anything else that's out there, but it's certainly a person's choice as to whether or not they get it. And we haven't done any, we've not done any campaigns or anything like that in schools, or, I mean, I know you mentioned schools, we've not done that.
Well, with the COVID money and things like that, are we already doing some of this with the COVID funds that we have?
We have been doing some of that already. And as I mentioned to you earlier, this particular agreement addenda, state agreement addenda 716, we actually received a smaller portion of funding earlier last year. It was sort of the same general agreement addenda. This is just a continuation of this funding initiative through, this year, and can be carried over to next year.
This has an emphasis on children and adolescents in this program. We heard that gentleman earlier that spoke in public comments with the concerns that this was so that they have immunity, I guess, prosecutorial.
Well, it is, and I think the
Probably the reason for that is because, now vaccine is now approved for a younger age group. So it's just the fact that as changes in the vaccine availability in terms of who it's approved for, it just, it opens that up for us to be able to support vaccinations to all folks that are eligible for it.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to make a motion to recognize, receive, and appropriate $335,968 of FY '22 Agreement Addendum Revision Number 1, funding related to the CDC COVID-19 vaccination program for the Human Services Agency Division of Public Health. Number 2, approve special revenue ordinance amendment number 70. Any discussion? All in favor?
Just,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Chairman Ray. Yeah, I'm going to support this. I believe in freedom of choice. I think it's a principle that in the modern day, sometimes it's on shaky ground. For folks that want the vaccine, it should be easily available. And for folks that don't want it, they don't have to get it.
Right.
So I'm going to support this motion.
I'll agree. I get a lot of emails from both sides, people that support the vaccine effort and those that don't. All it's doing is giving our citizens a choice, and so I can support that. There are parents that are adamant they want themselves and maybe their children's vaccinated. That's their choice. That's not a
Right.
governmental issue.
Commissioner Rushing.
Mr. Joyner, are we running short on vaccine?
Yes, sir.
Can you come up to the microphone? We're not running short on vaccine. There's plenty available.
There is plenty available, yes, certainly now. We order it through the state, and it comes to us on a scheduled basis, but we have not had any shortages
So
recently.
will this money go toward vaccine mainly, or
It won't go
promotion?
toward, it won't go toward purchasing vaccine.
It'll go toward promotion.
It's going toward providing support for staff to coordinate vaccination clinics, putting them on, those kind of things.
I'm not going to support the motion.
Okay. We have a motion. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Your nay. Okay. Mr. Helms, you wanted to add?
Well, I'm going to wait and add that to next month's agenda.
Okay.
It's a item for vetting on board applicants, but we've been here long enough tonight without
Okay.
further discussion.
Managers' comments.
Okay, just to clarify, Mr. Helms, would you like for us to add an item to the next agenda?
Next agenda, yes.
Which would be if you want to go ahead and tell us what that item is, we'll be glad to
Well,
make note of it.
we experienced the benefit of vetting candidates for boards, and we came up with some excellent candidates for the board for DHS. What I'd like for the staff to do to go check and see how we can implement that process in other boards like the Planning Board, Board of Adjustments. Not all boards would be efficient on, but if you can come back and
Mr. Helms, we'll put an item on the agenda for board discussion next time where we will, as staff, look at all the different ways that candidates for these advisory boards come to you, and be prepared to kind of give you the grocery list of how that occurs today, and that could facilitate some board discussion and some further direction to staff should changes or additional information be needed.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the board's time tonight. It has been lengthy. There's been a number of items that were on tonight's agenda, particularly under the business, that were purposefully placed there for transparency. We want the board to have good information, solid information, and for that information to be public. We believe it helps us make better decisions, and it helps you make better decisions, and we appreciate the time you spent tonight discussing those. We will place the item that we did not get to tonight regarding the update on the Yadkin River Water Project on the agenda for next time. That is, project's going well. There's a lot of good things to talk about there, so we want to make sure we get that in front of you so you know exactly what the status of that is, and moreover, the public knows what the status of that is. The last thing I'll bring to your attention tonight is recently we conducted I believe it was our fourth employee climate survey. The third climate survey under the current methodology we used, but that just wrapped up. In conversation with the Human Resource Director this afternoon, preliminary numbers look like we had somewhere in the neighborhood of an 85% participation rate, which is considerably higher than what we've ever had in the past. So I'm excited about that little bit of teaser information related to the participation in the employee climate survey, and we will be receiving that information as a management staff from the HR department over the next couple of weeks. But this information related to the results of the survey will be delivered to the board at your March the 7th meeting. So with that, I appreciate y'all's time and attention tonight, and wish you a good evening.
Commissioner Simpson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't want to drag the evening out too long, but just a couple of comments. First, I want to apologize for missing the last board meeting. I think it was maybe the second, possibly the third board meeting that I'd missed in my 12-year tenure as commissioner. I made the mistake of forgetting that Martin Luther King's meeting is on a Tuesday instead of a Monday. And so a couple of months before, I booked a specialist out of Raleigh to come down and do a program. So I felt like I needed to go to that program rather than come to the board meeting. So I apologize to the board. I know on another item, I know several months, maybe a year ago, we got up in arms about the fact that Mr. Zuckerberg's foundation had given some money to the Board of Elections at the state level, and some of that money trickled down to our volunteer workers. And I had a decision to make whether I want to give those volunteer workers that compensation for their time or tell them to take the money and shove it. We just talked about our ARPA funds that we received. Every year, the Union County Public Schools has a federal dollars component that goes into their budget in federal dollars. Highway funds, federal highway funds, and there's often strings attached to those dollars. Congress, our congressmen that we send to Washington are the ones that approve that money and send it down to us. If we want to hire a staff of employees to monitor all our federal dollars, I assume we can do that as a board. If we want to become self-sufficient, we can. We'll just have to pay for it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have a good evening.
Commissioner Rushing. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I'd just like to offer a robust robust applause for our Union County Board of Education and also our Public Health Director, Dennis Joyner. Last week, I think they made together a very good decision about the course of public health and our education and our mental health for our students in Union County. So I, again, just would like to congratulate and thank our Public Health Director and our Union County Board of Education for a job well done.
Thank you. Commissioner Helms.
Yes, the only thing I'd like to say is I'd like to thank our Utilities Department. I had the opportunity to observe them do some work. They were very professional, very considerate, and we should be proud of these employees that were doing the work. They did a great job.
Okay, my comments, besides staff, I appreciate you, is a public service announcement, and I will hand it to our communications director after I read this. But we have the Home and Community Block Grant Advisory Committee in Union County currently has 6 vacancies. This committee is meeting virtually currently. What this committee, or what you would do is, if you apply for this, you attend all the meetings, which I don't believe they have but 8 a year. Michelle? Okay. You become knowledgeable about all the levels of the aging network. You become knowledgeable about the flow of HCCBG funds and budgetary requirements. You become knowledgeable about the allowable services available in our county and the qualifications. Older adults must comprise 1/3 of the committee, a potential public or private provider of aging services, an elected county official and leaders, a variety of other entities with aging interest, have an interest and concern for the aging population of North Carolina, and represent a broad range of aging interest and community demographics. So again, I would urge you, if you want to serve the community, this would be a ample way to help our community. So with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.